marvelous long reads.
The Dark Tower is one of Stephen King's most beloved series. It's the story of the last gunslinger, but did you know there's a set of comic books called The Dark Tower Beginnings that answer some of the biggest questions that arose from that franchise? Like, how did Roland Deschain become the last gunslinger? What happened to those other gunslingers? Where does Roland even come from? This video will answer those questions and many more you didn't even know you needed answers for. Follow us to Midworld, where a young Roland trains to become the best gunslinger he can be. Meet his quartet, follow his father, and be introduced to the most important people in young Roland's life. Let's take a look at the doomed world that birthed the last gunslinger and the tragedy that led him to his destiny at the Dark Tower. Grab some popcorn and buckle in, because this is gonna be a wild ride. The Gunslinger Born, issue number 1, in a world that has moved on. Like many tales, this one begins with a chase that spans time, reality, and imagination as if it's the brush painting and erasing all in its path simultaneously. A man dressed in ebony sprints across a white, waterless desert. The nearby carcass and the vultures feeding on it mean nothing to him as he leaps over them. The man's throat coughs and wheezes, and at first, it seems that it might be the ragged despair of him reaching his limits, but then it seems like it might be the chuckling of a fox planning to turn the tables on its hunter. Could be either, or both, but when the vultures return, so does his hunter. Whereas the man in black fled across the desert, the gunslinger followed. The gunslinger may seem familiar. For his legend, the echoes of him have been seen in tales spun across many other places in many other ways. Just like the story of the flood that cuts across the consciousness of all mankind, so too does the gunslinger. He's iconic, your best friend and worst enemy, your damnation or your salvation, and sometimes he's all of the above. He is known by many names, if one such as him can be known at all. He's a creature of destiny, something he calls the Ka. Ka is a wheel, and its purpose is to turn, and in the end, it will always come back to the place where it started. And the gunslinger, well, his Ka turns towards an inevitable goal, which is the Dark Tower. But as it turns, it also leads him towards that which is long past. Friends, loved ones, a land once thriving, now dead, and a father whose face must never be forgotten. And so, we head to the past, to a time lost to memory. A time when the gunslinger was young, and so were his friends, and the strongest part of this memory is the smell in the air. The heady aroma of the tall grass, the stench of the clean air unbefouled by pollution, and of course, the forbidden view of the extinct realm of Gilead. This is a time when the world was, if not new, then at least not as old as it would become, and some call it the New Earth. Today, a man's quest begins with the boys' test, where the boys have gathered to test their skills, and Roland Deschain, son of Stephen from the line of Eld, is in focus. Like all his friends, Roland has his hawk perched on his arm, the helmet still on, as Court reminds them of how things should work. Alongside him is Cuthbert Allgood, son of Robert, a boy whose constant stream of jokes and kindness hides deep complexity and dark turns. Then there's Elaine Johns, son of Christopher, who's clever, sensitive, and has a rare skill called the Touch, where he can see the near past when he touches someone. And lastly, Thomas Whitman and Jamie DeCurry of the Marked Face. There are many others behind these boys, but their names and fathers need not concern us for now. We instead will follow their concerns instead, and their concern is the man in front of them, a man named Court. The boys listen closely as Court's voice booms aloud in the openness of Gilead and echoes through their impressionable minds. You do not aim with your hand. He who aims with his hand has forgotten the face of his father. You aim with your eye. You do not shoot with your hand. He who shoots with his hand has forgotten the face of his father. You shoot with your mind. You do not kill with your gun. He who kills with his gun has forgotten the face of his father. You kill with your heart. Understood, maggots? The boys listen intently because Court's word is law, and their muscles instinctively tense up because the scent of challenge and expectation now permeates the air. Court is squat, muscular, missing an eye, and covered in scars from head to toe. Some would say he's the instructor from hell, but right now, he's the one who tests the boys. And they are ready, for on his mark, they all let their hawks fly when he releases the white pigeons. Roland's hand is the fastest. first among his equals. He has his hawk airborne while the others are still pulling off their birds' hoods. The hawks are more than birds. They're examples for the young would-be warriors. They hunt quickly, efficiently, and dispassionately. Roland's hawk returns to him, having made its kill, while the other hawks return empty-handed, but that's the least of their worries, for following the return of their hawks is Court, who screams, "You were slow, maggots!" And the others instantly cry out, "We cry your pardon, Court," but the boys are knocked away. For according to Court, this is a transgression of the highest order. Speak the high speech. Speak of your act of contrition in the speech of civilization, for which better men than you will ever be have died, maggots. The boys beg for Court's pardon, and eventually the man calms down and says, "That's right, brats. You'll consider what you did wrong and sharpen your reflections with hunger. No supper, no breakfast." And upon this, when a hint of displeasure invades Roland's eyes, Court challenges him, and Roland doesn't back down. The instructor then says, "When you think you can, you come for me, maggot. Come to me, as our tradition demands. Fight me and leave as a gunslinger or as an exile. And follow the example of your hawk when you do. For remember, hawks are God's gunslingers." Roland leaves, and though we aren't privy to his inner thoughts, him carrying the Book of Falconry is clearly a sign that Court's words prey on his thoughts. However, we must stop Roland's tale here to introduce Martin Broadcloak, the wizard and chief advisor to Roland's father, Stephen. Stephen is a great man, leader of the gunslingers, and on the verge of becoming the Din of Gilead. But all men have weaknesses, and Martin Broadcloak is Stephen's, which Roland is about to learn the hard way as he makes his way through one of Gilead's back alleys. Martin pops out of his abode and invites Roland into his chambers, for, according to the wizard, Roland's mother wishes to speak to him. Roland walks inside and discovers his naked mother still reeling from the waves of pleasure that infect these chambers. Martin casually says, "Gabrielle, you wondered what your son was up to of late? Wonder no more." And so, Gabrielle stumbles, begs her son's pardon, and scrambles to cover up her skin in the presence of her son. But Roland has seen enough. Far too much of his mother, and the love bite on her neck, certainly not courtesy of her rightful husband, Roland's father. She makes small talk, asks Roland about his training, and her son quickly responds and turns away. He walks out with the scent of disdain and revenge permeating his being as Martin mocks him and then hits his mother violently once he's gone. Bad times are coming. The horizon is drenched with them, but whether Roland knows that or not is unclear as we see him break down the front door to Court's abode. He's doing exactly what Martin wants him to. Maybe he knows that, maybe he doesn't, or maybe he just doesn't give a damn. Roland kicks another table and then screams, "Court! I want you, bondsman. Teach me no more, for today I teach you." Court knew this day would eventually come, but even by his regards and judgment, Roland is 2 years early, and this is ultimately sad, for Roland had been one of his most promising pupils in the past 24 years, and seeing him broken and set on a blind path is going to be a waste. Court reminds Roland that the penalty for overeagerness is the same as the penalty for unworthiness, and says, "I blame you not. You're seeking to follow your father's example, challenging me at so young an age, seeking the right to wield guns. But Stephen Deschain is the Lord of Gilead, and twice the man you are, so why not wait half again as long?" Well, Roland doesn't respond, and his silence is all the answer Court needs, and thus he says, "1 hour, and the weapon of your choice." "Will you bring your stick?" Roland asks, and Court responds, "I always have. What weapon do you choose?" And Roland says, "That's my business. Wise enough to begin. Go now. Meditate on your father's face. Much good will it do ya." And thus, a few minutes later, we see Cuthbert and Elaine discussing a man named John Farson, someone known to play polo with human heads, someone who stands against the affiliation, who Cuthbert is sure will be cut down by his father. The two then start arguing whose father would be the first to get to Farson, and this is when they spot Roland entering the pen of his hawk, David. Roland is being awfully cryptic about what's going on with him, and thus Elaine uses the touch on his friend to learn more. He instantly gets an image of what happened just a few minutes ago seeping into his head. Roland challenging Court, and Elaine can't help but blurt out, "You challenged Court? Art thou mad?" "Very much so," says Roland, and then we catch up with him as he walks into the battlefield, shirtless, and with David perched on his arm. Roland talks to the hawk as if palavering with a man, almost non-stop for the next hour. Roland ends his conversation with David by saying, "I think you die today. I think you will be made a sacrifice, like those little birds we trained you on. Do you remember? No? It doesn't matter. After today, I am the hawk, and each year on this day, I'll I'll shoot the sky in your memory. His friends call him stupid for coming to the battlefield without a weapon, not knowing that David is his ultimate weapon. Court then arrives, and the finality of their confrontation starts with the following words. Have you come here for a serious purpose, boy? I have come for a serious purpose. Have you come as an outcast from your father's house? I have so come, and will remain so, unless I best you. Have you come with your chosen weapon? I have. What is your weapon? My weapon is David. Last chance to cry off, boy. Last chance to surrender, old man. So then, have you at me, boy? In whose name? In the name of my father, Stephen Deschain, of the line of Eld. Come then, ye poor damned thing. And with that, the stocky, muscular, and formidable form of Court launches itself at Roland. Court's advantage is that when it comes to combat, he knows everything that's ever been. That's his strength, but also his weakness. Knowing what's been doesn't mean a thing if something new is coming. One can easily tell that, with Roland having declared his weapon, yet Court still doesn't fully know it. And so, when Roland launches David like a silent bullet, Court finally gets it, but it's too little too late. The hawk launches itself at Court's only good eye, and within seconds, manages to almost claw through it before Roland shoves David away. Roland has drawn the first blood of this combat, and he won't be stopped now. He tackles Court next, but even a blinded Court is too powerful for Roland. He refuses to go down. He grabs the boy, slams him to the ground, and then begins using his thumbs to gouge his eyes out. However, Roland grabs David and sicks the hawk at Court once again. The bird manages to damage Court's face significantly, but the instructor ultimately grabs the bird and tears it in two. David took Court's ear with him, and when Court begins to see again, he realizes Roland is holding his blade against him, and Roland will take the rest if Court doesn't yield. Court spits out a tooth and refuses to yield, and Roland smacks him across the face with his own stick. With the man now on the ground, Roland punches him again, and then grabs his blade and slams it into Court, or so it seems at first, but Roland changes his mind at the last second. The blade misses Court narrowly, and Roland screams, "Yield or die." Court coughs blood, laughs, and then says, "I yield, Gunslinger. I yield smiling. You have this day remembered the face of your father and all those who came before him. What a wonder you have done. The key, my birthright, teacher, the key to the vault where hang the apprentice weapons that I've earned, that I now by law must wear." Court struggles to stand up, and as he tries to do so, he doubles over, but manages to say, "Is your need so fearsome then? So pressing?" "Aye, I feared so. The hawk was a fine weapon. How long did it take you to train him?" "I never trained David. I friended him. The key? Under my belt." Court hands over the key to Roland and then says, "I teach you no more, Gunslinger. You have surpassed me, and that too, 2 years younger than your father, who was the youngest. But let me counsel. For what? Let the word and legend go before you. There are those who will carry both. Fools, perchance, given time, words may even enchant an encounter. Do you take my meaning, Gunslinger?" "Yes, I think I do. And later, after I bury my hawk, I will go into Tower Town to inform those in the brothels that will wonder about you. Perhaps I will comfort one or two, take him to his house, and bring a nurse." With the others left to attend to Court, Roland then asks Cuthbert's help with burying David, but before they do so, Roland needs to arm himself. He's earned the right to do so, and so, with David's remains in his arms, Roland grabs the nickel-plated guns of a first-year gunslinger from the armory. On their way back, Cuthbert asks Roland what the point of all this was, but when he spots Roland's mother half-naked in Martin's quarters, he quickly puts two and two together. Roland confronts Martin. He knows the sorcerer forced his hand. He was expecting Roland to fail and perish, and despite his mother believing otherwise, Roland knows that this is the truth. And so, after a tense confrontation, Roland ultimately spares Martin for now, and after having buried David with Cuthbert's help, he ends his day in a Baud's bed, something he adjusted to Court, which has seemingly come true. He sleeps soundly after doing the deed, and this is when another gunslinger stealthily enters the room. Roland is alerted to the mysterious man's presence. He grabs his revolver and gets up, but before he can take aim, the man pulls the trigger and destroys Roland's revolver in an instant. Roland's heart stops for a moment, for this is his father, and what he says next makes him rethink his choices. Roland's father points his revolver at him and declares, "You have forgotten the face of your father." The Gunslinger Born, issue number 2. What started with lust ends in love. Roland is woken from his slumber in the whore's quarters by a man at his bedside, a man whose face is to drive Roland to his caw, his destiny. And though the whore beside him tries to stand against this intrusion into her quarters, she quickly leaves when the man pulls out his gun and points it at Roland's head. He then smacks Roland across the face, and an angry Roland retaliates by pulling out his own gun from underneath the pillows. This is when we learn that this is Roland's father, Stephen Deschain, and he calls Roland a fool for acting like a desperate 14-year-old. In return, Roland screams at his father about his mother's affair, and this is when Stephen sympathizes with his son, but states that he was a fool who forgot his face nonetheless. Turns out, Stephen has known about his wife's affair for the past 2 years. However, why he hasn't done anything about it is too much speculation for Roland, and he dare not ask his father more, not directly to his face. Stephen then calms down and tells Roland that he has just put Martin's plans into motion, that he cannot go back to the palace because the Black Wizard has sworn to kill him, and he's been plotting it in the shadows, which is why he'll need to leave Gilead and go east. Meanwhile, in his chambers, Martin is busy coming up with the next phase of his plan. This wizard has many names. Walter O'Dim, the Man in Black, and some in Gilead even claim that he's John Farson himself, the sworn enemy of the Alliance, but whether that's true or not matters little, because one thing is clear, Martin's one evil son of a bitch, and then casts a spell on a piece of quartz to commune with the devil himself, the Lord of Spiders, the dreaded Crimson King. What's important to note here is that 6 spheres surround him. These are 6 of the 13 known seeing spheres, and notice how the ebony sphere is always the closest to him. This sphere, which is known as the Black 13, Martin's bald face emerges from it and informs the Crimson King of all that has transpired. Stephen Deschain has returned to Gilead. His plans to slaughter the Gunslingers and the affiliation brew in the Shaved Mountains, and the pink sphere is being delivered to its intended user. But the Crimson King only wants to know about Roland. Has Martin managed to get him exiled, or better yet, killed? This is when Martin tells him that against all odds, Roland managed to pass his test, and he's now a gunslinger. The furious Crimson King warns Martin that this is his last chance, for the prophecy that they were trying to avoid has now been expedited by Martin's incompetence in trying to finish the job he was assigned. Martin begins to apologize to the Crimson King when suddenly gunslingers burst into his room with a warrant for his arrest. Stephen has branded him a traitor, and though this is an unfortunate development, both Martin and Stephen know how this confrontation will play out. With a simple spell, Martin turns the gunslingers into dogs and then kicks them away. He then casts another spell, draws a doorway on the rock using chalk, and then simply walks through it. Meanwhile, the sun is set, and Roland, Cuthbert, and Elaine have gathered to receive their mission and blessings from their respective fathers before they head east. Cuthbert has a rook's skull around his neck, which Stephen finds peculiar, and we learn that Cuthbert considers the skull his best friend next to Roland and Elaine. He calls it Lookout. The boys are then ordered to hide their guns and other knickknacks that might give away their rightful status in the world. They don't want everyone knowing that they're gunslingers, or at least on their way to becoming one, in the case of Cuthbert and Elaine. They are then handed their new identities. They're now apprentice drovers for the affiliation. They will go to Hamry under the pretense of buying horses, but in reality, they're going to be the eyes and ears of the affiliation. Stephen wants to know if the Horsemen's association there has sided with Farson. They are also to check and confirm rumors of oil being refined in Hamry, and if that is the case, then the affiliation will need to put an end to it soon before Farson can use it to power the weapons of the Great Old Ones. Roland has been scowling at his father all this while, and Stephen is forced to reassure him that their mission is true. The affiliation truly needs healthy steeds to aid their war against Farson. He then hands them carrier pigeons that will help them stay in touch, and after warning Roland to keep his anger in check, he sends them on their way. As they're departing, Stephen bites his tongue and tells Roland about the rumors of the pink sphere and that he's to send word if he finds anything about it, and he explicitly warns Roland not to go after the sphere on his own. Roland nods, but as he leaves, he knows his mother is watching from the shadows, and as a parting gift, he screams just loud enough for her to hear, "My father's face I shall always remember. Yours I shall strive to forget." Meanwhile, in Hamry, Clay Reynolds is playing cards with Roy DePape and another man who is eventually shot in the head by Reynolds when he calls him a cheat. This is when Eldred Jonas enters and calms the situation down before it gets out of hand. After all, they are the Big Coffin Hunters and the newly appointed deputies of the Sheriff and Mayor Thorin's new security service. DePape and Reynolds are mildly surprised by this revelation, and even more so when they're told that their first task is to deliver a package to Rhea, the old witch feared by all in these parts. She's to hold something for Farson until he makes his way here. While walking out of the place, Jonas tosses a coin to the simpleton who serves the inn and orders him to clean up the dead man's body. Roland, Cuthbert, and Elaine, meanwhile, decide to rest at an inn which lies on the way to Hamry, and this is where we're told about Ka-Tet. Ka means destiny, whereas Ka-Tet roughly translates to one from many. Ka-Tet is a group bound by fate. Roland is with his Ka-Tet of Cuthbert and Elaine, and they currently march on their road to Ka. Inside the inn, they find a weed addict, and Roland decides that the man is likely good enough to tell them about rumors of the area and what has become of Hamry. The inn is in a small hamlet named Ritzy, and as they talk to the addict, they learn that Pat Delgado, the man they were supposed to meet, has seemingly been killed by the new deputies of the town. Meanwhile, beneath the kissing moon of tonight, the new deputies shudder as they watch the old witch emerge from her burrow to take the package they're supposed to deliver. Jonas hands over the sack, and the witch is unable to contain her excitement. The deputies leave after warning her to keep the package safe, but before the witch can peek at the pink sphere, the voice of a girl singing nearby catches her off guard. This girl is Susan Delgado, Pat's daughter, and she has been sent here by Mayor Thorin because she's just had her first period. Susan hands the old crone a sack full of coins that was given to her by her Aunt Cordelia, and Rhea orders her to gather firewood before entering her burrow. Susan does as she's told, while the witch finally gets to peek at the sphere. In it, she sees the silhouette of 3 riders, who at first she assumes are the new deputies, but when she takes a closer look, she realizes that these are young boys. This is Roland and his quartet. She knows that these boys are somehow important for the things to come, and as she speaks to herself aloud, we see Susan listening in on her. When Susan enters the burrow, we learn that she's been sent here to prove her honesty spiritually and physically, which is just a fancy way of saying that Mayor Thorin wants her virginity checked to make sure that she will give him the heir that he longs for. Once the deed is done, the crone hands her a paper that holds her mark, proving Susan's honesty, and Rhea then tells her that Thorin isn't to bed her until the demon moon arises, which is still 3 months away. She then has Susan stare into a mysterious medallion, which forces her to forget what happened here, and when Susan comes out of the trance, she runs away weeping. She begs to her father's spirit, for in his absence, hell has broken loose. The entire town thinks she's the mayor's whore, her own kin don't look her in the eye, and the only thing she can do now is wish for death. Something that won't come anytime soon, so all she can do is beg her dead father for some kind of help, and to her surprise, help manifests in the form of a young boy atop a horse directly in front of her. The Gunslinger Born, Issue number 3, The Pride of a Man and the Grit of a Boy. Susan and Roland lock eyes like star-crossed lovers. To them, this is a simple meeting, but the world's souls swear on the rest of existence that their meeting is nothing less than a lightning bolt that shakes the fabric of reality itself. Roland politely greets Susan, who in turn reciprocates his courtesy, but then she pulls out a knife to protect herself, and Roland reassures her that he means her no harm. In fact, he offers to escort her into town, which she accepts. And so, with Susan on his horse, Roland leads the way. Roland introduces himself as Will Dearborn, and when asked about his purpose in these parts, he tells her that he's here on behalf of the affiliation, along with his friends Richard Stockton and Arthur Heath. They're here for horses, and as they continue to converse, Roland learns that Susan has been stripped of everything. Thorin now owns everything because Pat Delgado never had a male heir. Soon, they pass by an oil patch, and Susan tells him that some of the derricks are still operational and they continue to pump because nobody knows how to stop them. As they walk further, Roland's ears are pierced by what is seemingly a siren wailing, and Susan tells him that this is the sound of the Thinny located in Eyebolt Canyon. Roland has heard of Thinnies, but this is his first time in the presence of one. The thing sounds like it's alive, and Susan nonchalantly tells him that it's like an ugly burning peat fire and a swamp full of green water. And then it's time for them to part ways, and the only thing Susan requests of Will Dearborn, aka Roland, is that he meet her tomorrow as if he's seeing her for the first time. This makes Roland question if she's been promised in marriage, and Susan simply kisses him and tells him that hers is a delicate position for now. The kiss was brief, but definitely not sisterly, and so as she walks away, Roland says, "I look forward to meeting you for the first time." And then we get our first glimpse of the formidable enemy of the affiliation, Farson, dressed in black armor with a horrid red mask. The man holds up a burned, decapitated head as he asks his men to wager. Farson has just destroyed the city of Indri, which was the barony seat of Crescia, and he's currently thwacking heads away for fun. He wins his bet, and the rock on which the head lands is the same one where a doorway appears and Martin Broadcloak emerges. Farson angrily asks Martin for the oil he was promised, and the Dark Wizard leads him aside to talk about it and other important matters. And so, the next day, Roland and his friends arrive at Seafront, Mayor Thorin's abode, and they are welcomed in with grace and respect, although the vibes Thorin's deputies are giving off are as cold as ice. Susan and Will lock eyes again. They pretend as if they're meeting for the first time, But Roland can't help himself. His eyes continue to follow her around, and though Thorin may be stupid, the rest aren't. Elaine, Cuthbert, and Eldred Jonas all take notice of the tension brewing between these two seemingly star-crossed lovers. Eventually, introductions are in order, and they address Hash Renfrew, an influential member of the Horsemen's Association, who tells them the horse bloodlines are clarifying well. 3 foals out of every 5 are threaded stock, the 4th can be put to work but cannot be bred, and it's only the 5th one that's born mutated. However, birth rates are extremely low, and this is when another woman chimes in who's seemingly frustrated. She cockily mocks Renfrew and tells Roland that he will blame late Pat Delgado for lower birth rates. Everyone here blames him for anything that's wrong, but when it comes to his daughter, everyone revels in her beauty. This is when Roland learns that Susan is Thorin's Sheevan, his promised side wife, who's not to be consummated until the Reap. This naturally disgusts him, but the woman doesn't stop. She continues to mock the men and even reveals to everyone that his wife, Olive, is barren and can't bear him a worthy heir. Eventually, they have dinner, which ends with a dance where Roland finds himself face to face with Susan Delgado once again, and she thanks him for his discretion and propriety, while Roland uses this opportunity to discreetly point her to Olive's gaze, whose eyes burn with hatred for Susan. The boys then depart to their abode for the night, where Clay Reynolds is resting near the bar at a table after having returned from his recent venture into the wild. This is when a drunk man begins to goad him into a confrontation by calling him out because he smells like oil and pine gum. He wants to know if Reynolds has been in the Citgo, and this is when Reynolds kicks the man away because he doesn't want his secret discovered. This, in turn, causes the man to tumble and smack into Shimi, who, in turn, ends up spilling camel piss on Roy DePape's shoes. Roy then pulls out his gun and points it at Shimi and orders him to lick his boots clean. The simpleton young boy tries to offer an excellent shoe-shining service instead, but when Roy insists, he decides to go along with it. However, this is when Cuthbert intervenes and Roy threatens him, which forces Cuthbert to pull out his slingshot and shoot at him. It happens so fast that this incident will be etched in the legends of this land. Long after the fall of Gilead, it will still be talked about. How Roy DePape, who was known for his speed, was bested by a boy and his slingshot. Cuthbert's metal ball not only knocked the gun out of his hand, but also managed to smash the top of his second finger and tear off the nail. Cuthbert warns Roy to think about his next move carefully. However, this is when he gets a gun pointed at the back of his head by Clay Reynolds. And then Elaine enters the standoff, holding a knife to Clay's throat, which is when Eldred Jonas points a gun to the back of Elaine's head, thus forcing Roland to enter the standoff, who holds a dagger to Jonas's back. By the time the drunken sheriff shows up on the scene, all weapons have been holstered, and Sheriff Avery forces all of them to cry each other's pardon because they can't have deputies killing affiliation counters on their first day in town. The men eventually agree, and Jonas and Roland shake hands while crying each other's pardon, and so the boys ride off into the night while discussing the lines that were just drawn in blood. Jonas's eyes spoke only a few words, and they were all about killing the boys. They also managed to spot the coffin tattoos on the hands of the men, which tells them that they are trained assassins. With the leaders of Hamry now allied with Farson behind closed doors, they know that this won't end well, especially now that their enemies know more about them and have seen what they can do. And at the same time, a similar discussion seems to be going on among the big coffin hunters, only this time Jonas is livid. He grabs DePape by the throat because he knows that those boys were gunslingers, and the only reason Jonas called in a truce was because they are so close to achieving their plans. But once that's done, Jonas is going to find Roland and put a bullet between his eyes. The Gunslinger Born, issue number 4. The Kissing Moon Sets. Susan is having a tough day, mostly because of the crudeness Roland, or Will as she knows him as, showed him back at the seafront. Her thoughts swirling like a hurricane, Susan knows better than to ride her horse Pylon along the drop to try and escape her own thoughts. However, this is when she finds her path being blocked by Roland, who begs her pardon and tells her that he fell in love with her the moment he saw her. At first, Susan doesn't believe him. Falling in love at first sight is a thing of fairy tales, but Roland's love is unwavering, and she starts to believe it by first forgiving him for what happened at Seafront, and then by telling her to call her Susan and not Sai. And then it's time for the real conversation, where we learn that Susan, just like most people in Hamry, stands for the affiliation, but they do so behind closed doors, partly because those that rule them seemingly lie to their faces, and partly because it's been a long time since either of them has felt the presence of the affiliation. Roland then asks about her horses, and she reveals that there's at least 1,000 of them in the drop and around 200 more of them in stables or in training. Roland realizes that Fran Lengill lied to him, and this eventually leads to him making Susan realize that her father, Pat Delgado's death, might not have been a freak accident because Fran was the only witness. However, this is a touchy subject for her, and when he asks if Will has been truthful with her, Roland can't help but falter, which eventually ends their conversation on this subject. However, that's when Roland grabs her, tells her to meet him at the Citgo in 2 nights, and then kisses her. Elaine and Cuthbert, meanwhile, are busy hiding their guns at Bar K, the small residence where they're staying. The two are worried about Roland and his relationship with Susan. They both think it's a bad idea, and it may lead their quartet astray. This is when Roland appears on the horizon outside and receives a message from their fathers, which is brought by one of the pigeons. He opens the note in the presence of his friends, and it tells him that Farson has split his forces and is now moving east. Roland decides to write back that they've discovered nothing out of place for now, which both of his friends find cryptic, but they decide to let him be. However, as Roland leaves, Elaine finds a strand of blonde hair on his shirt, and they both realize that their fears might be coming true. Meanwhile, DePape has been tracking the 3 boys' path, and he soon arrives at the saloon in Ritzy, where he manages to coax the weed addict into revealing everything he knows about the boys. The addict tells him that they were definitely gunslingers, and if his suspicion is right, then one of the boys was an heir from the House of Eld. Satisfied with the information, DePape thanks the man and then tips him off for his service with some lead to his chest. Meanwhile, Martin arrives at a refinery in the dead lands of Endworld, and when a guard stops him, he changes his face to that of Walter O'Dim and gains entry without any more hurdles. He's here to meet George Latigo, the person in charge of this refinery. Latigo uses slow mutants to do his dirty work because if they succumb to hydrofluoric acid, they can be easily replaced. Martin orders him to bag a slow mutant's dead body so that he can study it, and then informs him of Farson's wishes. Latigo is to escort the tankers once they've been filled, and he also tells them about the 3 boys and how the Crimson King himself has demanded their demise. Latigo doesn't flinch when he's told that they might be gunslingers, and that's because he has tanks of his own. The boys, meanwhile, are scouting Eyebolt Canyon. Roland has led them there against their instincts to count the thinny to do as they were told. They ride up a creek, haunted by the wailing of the thinny, and watch as a buzzard is snatched out of the sky by a mysterious tentacle. Elaine's touch power seems to be on high alert as he can feel the thinny. It's like a living thing, and it's hungry, insatiably hungry. It's a cancer consuming the fabric of reality. When Roland hears this, he realizes that he can use the thinny against their enemy, and he spots a narrow path that can be used to escape from the canyon after they've led their enemies here. The path is too close to the thinny, but it seems to be worth the risk. Cuthbert can sense what his friend is planning, and so he proposes that they should test out their theory now to make sure that they can survive being so close to the thinny. Roland takes him up on that offer, and as the boys take the path, the wailing of the thinny soon turns into a voice that does its best to lure them into it. The offer is quite enticing, but eventually they manage to overcome the allure, and Roland shoots a bullet in the thinny's direction before making his escape. They then reach the hanging rock, and that's when, using his touch, Elaine discovers the tankers hidden at this location, and this confirms Roland's suspicions. Farson will be coming for his oil any time now. Meanwhile, Susan is in her dressing room, waiting for the seamstress to come and finish her reap-tied gown when Thorin enters the room, and despite her protests and against Rhea's orders, he violates her. The Gunslinger Born, issue number 5. The Peddler's Moon Rises. We start this issue with Susan and learn that Thorin didn't actually do the deed and simply dry-humped her. When a broken Susan tried to talk to her Aunt Cordelia about it, she simply tells her niece to get over it because this was going to happen eventually. This is her caw. Susan is in the willows, drowning her sorrows all alone, when suddenly Will appears before her. He could feel something was wrong, so he came to see her. Susan addresses him as Will, but this is when Roland tells her his real name and puts his life and the fate of his quartet in her hands. In return, Susan tells him, "If you love me, then love me." And so, our 2 star-crossed lovers sleep with each other. In the barony of Meiji, at the end of the last great age, Susan loses her virginity, and thus, the 2 were joined together and doomed together. After the deed is done, Roland vows to Susan that she won't ever have to go to Thorin's bed again, and once the 2 of them fall asleep, Roland wakes up sometime later, only to find Susan no longer by his side. Frantically, he searches around for her, and finds her trying to cut her hair with a piece of quartz in some kind of a trance. Roland snaps her out of it, and then hypnotizes her using a shell casing to find out who did this to her. He discovers that Rhea hypnotized her and ordered her to cut her hair once she lost her virginity. Rhea said even more after that, but for some reason, Susan doesn't remember it. She only remembers the color pink, and this makes Roland suspect that the power of the pink sphere, Marilyn's grapefruit, might be at play here. If only he knew that that same sphere was being used by Rhea right now to spy on them, and when she realizes that Susan failed to cut her hair, she decides to play with all of their fates again and sends her mutant cat to the Traveler's Inn along with a note. Sometime later, we see Cuthbert and Elaine standing guard at the edge of an abandoned orange grove next to the Sitgo's fence. Roland has gone inside, along with Susan, and this has left his friends wondering if the girl is going to make him betray his purpose. Inside, Roland discovers pipes that have been recently used to pump oil, and then footprints that belong to Reynolds. The footprints lead him to silver storage containers that were recently dragged here and fitted with new wheels, no doubt in anticipation of Farson's arrival. Susan is puzzled, and Roland catches her up to speed. He tells her about the old war machines that Farson has found. Many believe them to be dead relics, but if he manages to get them working, he could slaughter 10,000 horse-mounted men in an instant. They then leave, and Susan and Roland fail to notice the look of suspicion in Cuthbert and Elaine's eyes, and Cuthbert fails to notice that Lookout has fallen off his saddle. Meanwhile, Jonas is told by DePape that the boys are gunslingers, and so he orders him to have Lengyel post a dozen men at the oil patch. This is when Rhea's cat enters the inn and hands the note to the owner, which demands more drinks for the witch. The owner forces Shimi to deliver the drinks against his will, while Eldred decides to investigate Bar K, the place where the boys are staying. At Bar K, Eldred discovers the boys' pigeons and then decides to slaughter them after he's found their guns. Minutes later, we see Roland and his party racing towards Bar K because of Elaine's warnings, and when they arrive, they find the front door open. Their belongings have been desecrated, their pigeons killed, and their clothes have been pissed on. Roland finds a strand of Eldred's hair, and they instantly realize who's behind this. However, Roland holds his friends from waging a war against the deputies for now. This is when Cuthbert loses his cool. He tells Roland that Susan has turned him into a coward, and then storms out of their abode and rides away on his horse. Meanwhile, Martin pays another visit to Latigo after having conferred with Farson and tells him that he's to ride for the Hanging Rock immediately. They're to collect the tankers once they're full, and the big coffin hunters are to bring them and the grapefruit to Farson as soon as possible. Also, Latigo is to ensure that the 3 affiliation boys are killed. Meanwhile, Cuthbert realizes that he lost Lookout when he sees an omen while festering in his anger, and this is when, in the oil patch, Eldred finds the rook's skull, and he knows that the boys have found his hidden secret. The Gunslinger Born, issue number 6, The Cost of Love, The Loss of Soul. Cuthbert is riding along the Seacoast Road, replaying his confrontation with Roland in his mind over and over again when he spots Shimi. The boy looks pale, and Cuthbert learns it's because he's taking a note from Rhea to Susan's aunt, Cordelia. His life has been threatened, and so, to ease his pain, Cuthbert volunteers to deliver the note himself. When the note is handed to him, Cuthbert breaks the wax seal, and his eyes narrow with anger as the words written reveal themselves to him. Meanwhile, Eldred Jonas is sleeping with Coral when DePape alongside Latigo enter their chamber and inform him of Farson's latest wishes. Jonas agrees to get the tankers delivered, but that's when Latigo tells him that Farson has ordered him to take the 3 gunslinger boys seriously, and this is when Jonas comes up with a plan to frame them for the murder of Mayor Thorin using Cuthbert's rook skull that he had found earlier. Coral, too, is on board with the plan. In fact, she hates her brother so much that she offers to lead the charge after this death herself. Cuthbert, meanwhile, returns to Bar K and asks Roland to come outside. When Roland does so, he gets off his horse and then punches him directly in the face. Roland goes down, and that's when Cuthbert tosses the note Shimi was carrying at him, and upon reading it, Roland realizes what he's done. Rhea knows about him and Susan. She knows Susan is no longer a virgin, and this note was going to inform her Aunt Cordelia of the same. Roland has risked their lives and Susan's life, all because he failed to realize that Rhea could spy on them using the grapefruit. He begs his friends' pardons and then convenes with Susan and Shimi that night in the Hamry cemetery. The unease between them after the introductions is palpable, and Susan finally breaks the silence by saying, "I hope you don't hate me. I'd understand if you did, though. I come into your plans between the 3 of you, but I couldn't help it. I love him." Elaine eases her worries, saying they don't hate her, and after all, they're part of a quartet. Roland's love gets the honor of being treated like their love. And then Roland tells them their plan. Farson intends to use the oil from Sitgo to engage the forces of the affiliation in the Shaved Mountains and ambush them using weapons of the old world, which is why Roland wants to destroy the oil patch and get the 5 of them out of this alive. After destroying the oil patch, they'll hit the men's forces at the Hanging Rock, where they will be protecting the hidden tankers. Roland plans to trigger an explosion in a couple of the tankers, which will significantly reduce their numbers, and once that's done, they'll reveal themselves and lure the men into the Thinny. With this decided, we switch to Mayor Thorin's quarters, where DePape enters and ruthlessly murders him. Having done that, he plants Cuthbert's lookout in his hands and then draws Farson's sigil on the wall using the mayor's blood to finish the job. Early the next morning, Susan is woken up by her servant Maria and is told of what has transpired. Susan knows that the boys are being framed, and thankfully, they have only been jailed for now. Thus, she quickly gets up and rides to Bar K and retrieves Roland's guns. As she arms and disguises herself, we learn that Susan is pregnant with Roland's child, which is why she won't let anything in this world harm her love or her child. And so, Susan enters the prison disguised as a gunslinger and pulls the gun on Sheriff Avery and Deputy Dave Hollis. Dave tries to tackle her, which ends up revealing her disguise, and when Sheriff Avery angrily threatens her life, Susan pulls the trigger and kills them both. She then frees the boys, and though they thank her, Susan knows that killing Dave was wrong. It's cost her, and the cost is her soul, because Dave was a good man, only 2 years older than her, and he had done nothing wrong in her life. This is the cost of love, and Susan has learned it the hard way. Roland, meanwhile, orders her and Shimi to hide somewhere safe, someplace close to the Great Road, while the boys go and hit Jonas where it hurts the most. That night, a horrified Jonas is woken up by the multiple explosions coming from the oil patch. The sky is covered in red over and over again, and he has no choice but to go to Rhea to get the grapefruit, and that's when she allows him to peek into the sphere, where he discovers that the boys have left Susan all alone and unprotected, which is why he's going to hurt them where it hurts the most. However, what Jonas doesn't realize is that this is all a part of Rhea's plans. The Gunslinger Born. Issue number 7, The End of Love. And so, as Susan sleeps and dreams of her love, she is unfortunately woken up by Jonas and the other big coffin hunters and their men. Jonas drags Susan out by her braid and then begins beating her over and over again. He tries to break her spirit, but Susan simply spits in his face. In turn, Jonas kicks her in the face, which by all means should have broken her neck, but it doesn't. He then orders Reynolds to take her back into town and snatches the grapefruit away from Rhea. The witch whines and curses him, but she's too weak to act on her impulses for now, so she lets the sphere go. Shimi, who's been watching all of this, has decided to follow Reynolds and Susan back into town. The boys, meanwhile, completely unaware of this development, wait for Jonas and his men in the bad grass, and when the men come around, they begin stealthily attacking them. Cuthbert takes out a couple of men using his slingshot and steel balls. Elaine takes out a couple more using daggers, but a missed shot ultimately reveals their presence, which results in an all-out war. Roland leads the charge, and each of them gets to have their revenge. Cuthbert kills DePape, and Roland puts 2 bullets through Jonas's face. The boys then retrieve the grapefruit, and Elaine grabs an automatic rifle from one of the fallen gunmen. Rhea, meanwhile, visits Susan's aunt. She hypnotizes the woman, feeds on her vital fluids, and convinces her that her niece needs to be murdered for losing her virginity before the intended time and to a man she wasn't betrothed to. As Rhea feeds, she whispers the words, "Charyu Tree," whispers which are faintly heard by Latigo at Hanging Rock. This is when they're assaulted by Roland and his quartet, and the bullets from Elaine's rifle ignite a series of explosions in the oil tankers that they were protecting. The boys run away, and as predicted, an enraged Latigo follows them with all of his men. Meanwhile, back in town, Rhea and Cordelia rile up the entire townsfolk against Susan for what she's done, and, strangely, Cordelia ends her speech with the words, "Charyu Tree." Meanwhile, Latigo's men carefully enter the narrow path to the Thinny, which they don't know of, and once they're a good way in, the boys light the brush behind them on fire, which blocks their path. They want to retreat, but Latigo forces them to go on, and this is when all of them are consumed by the Thinny. Horses, men, Latigo, everything is consumed. The job is done. Cuthbert and Elaine are celebrating, but the grapefruit is calling to Roland, and against everything, he decides to give in and peek into it, and what he sees kills everything inside him that had come to be known as Roland Deschain of the House of Eld. He sees Susan tied to a stake, burning to death, as she screams her last words, "Roland, I love thee." And this is when the grapefruit lays out Roland's destiny before him. He will kill everything and everyone he loves, beginning with Susan, yet the tower will still be shut against him. As the grapefruit continues to torment Roland, he hears the crowd around Susan chanting "Charyu Tree" over and over again. Roland falls to his knees, with the grapefruit held tightly against his chest, and his friends try to pry it away, but to no avail. When they call out to him, he doesn't respond, because like the moon at the close of a cycle, Roland is gone. The Long Road Home, Issue number 1, The Awakening. When Roland had first truly held Susan when in love, she had told him, "I love thee, Roland. I loved thee before I even knew thee. No matter where thou goest, my love will never diminish nor die. It will burn more fiercely than the fiercest star. It will burn forever." But now that Roland is reminded of this tender memory, his heart burns and his mind aches with each echoing word as Susan's charred remains slowly crumble and crack in his arms. Susan's death has been on the outside, but Roland is slowly dying on the inside. It's the reason he doesn't mourn, weep, or crumble, at least not yet. Cuthbert, meanwhile, reminds Elaine and Roland that they need to flee as soon as possible, but Elaine chides him for being so emotionless. They can't just leave Susan's body tied to the Charyu tree. She was murdered by her own kith and kin, for God's sakes. The least they can do is ensure a proper burial for her body. Cuthbert really wants to leave because each second they spend here gives their enemies enough time to regroup and impede their return to Gilead. And then, all of a sudden, Roland spins around, and in a voice not of this world, he screams, "It's all your fault!" And then he fires his revolver at Elaine, and Cuthbert instantly tackles him to the ground. What was Roland thinking? This wasn't Elaine's fault. Cuthbert screams for Roland to snap out of his mourning, but this is when Elaine tells Cuthbert that Roland wasn't shooting at him at all. The bullet was meant for the grapefruit, and Roland was likely targeting Rhea, Farson, or whomever may have been watching through the sphere. This is when the satchel holding the grapefruit begins to glow and then dissolves into sparks of red dust. Cuthbert, enraged, chastises Roland for destroying the grapefruit. After all, it was an artifact treasured by Farson. It could have been valuable to them in the war against him and his men. But Roland remains defiant. He doesn't care about the war. This was about making a statement, and Roland hopes that Farson, Rhea, or whoever was looking, stared into the barrel of his revolver as he pulled the trigger. This is when Elaine interrupts Cuthbert and points to the satchel he's holding. The grapefruit has now transformed. It's turned into a demonic eye with long, veiny tendrils. Elaine drops the thing to the ground, and while he and Cuthbert argue who should be the one to pick up this monstrosity, the eye lunges forward and attaches itself to Roland's face. Cuthbert grabs Roland and yanks him away, while Elaine grabs the eye. Once Roland is free, the eye transforms back into the grapefruit, and Elaine cryptically says, as mad as it sounds, "I think it's full." Cuthbert responds, "Full? Full of what? Never mind that. Help me with Roland. He's in shock." However, this is when Elaine reveals that Roland isn't even here. He can't feel him with his touch. Then, when he turns his attention back to the grapefruit, his jaw drops to the floor. Roland is in there, inside the grapefruit. His consciousness, his soul, whatever you may call it, it's in there. Cuthbert suggests Elaine should use his powers to free Roland, and Elaine already knows that this won't be easy. The grapefruit won't give up Roland without a fight. Meanwhile, inside the grapefruit, the dead Big Coffin Hunters, Eldred Jonas and Roy DePape, are forcing Roland to relive Susan's death. Not only that, they taunt him for having given up his quartet's position by firing his revolver at the grapefruit. This will surely aid the only surviving Big Coffin Hunter in tracking them down, and Jonas is right, because while Elaine tries to pry away Roland's soul from the grapefruit, Cuthbert tells them they have a bigger problem to worry about. Both of them can feel the vibrations in the ground, and this means that at least a dozen men on horseback are racing towards them. Cuthbert quickly grabs Roland's body and carries him on his shoulders as he and Elaine rush towards their horses. Cuthbert chides Elaine for not having listened to him earlier, because now they've put themselves in danger, all for nothing. They're still being forced to leave Susan's dead body behind, and on top of that, Roland has turned into a liability. Clay Reynolds and his posse of men from Hamry, meanwhile, are minutes away from Cuthbert and Elaine's location. Most of these men are the residents of Hamry dancing to the strings pulled by Farson. First, they were manipulated into killing an innocent Susan Delgado, and now they've been manipulated into hunting down Roland and his quartet. After all, to them, these three outsiders paid back Hamry's hospitality with murder and mayhem. Clay Reynolds is the only man among them who knows both sides of the story, and we all know whose side he favors. The men soon catch up with the three boys as they try to escape with their horses, but before Clay can aim and take his shot, Elaine turns around and fires while Cuthbert holds Roland steady on the horse. Elaine's aim is shoddy, but the retaliation helps them regardless because although he missed Clay, he did manage to kill his horse. Clay growls and curses as his steed falls lifeless to the ground. He orders a man named Taylor to hand over his horse so that he can continue the chase. This, however, gives Elaine and Cuthbert enough time to put some distance between themselves and the posse. The weather becomes their ally. The fog hides them at close range, and they dismount and cover their horses' tracks, and then walk on every piece of rocky ground they can find in order to hide their footprints. Fortunately, this leads them to a raging river, which Cuthbert thinks is a great opportunity for them to lose Clay and his men once and for all. Elaine, however, isn't too keen on diving into the water. He's pretty sure that they'll all drown, but Cuthbert won't stand for hesitation any longer. He says, "We have no time for maybes, Elaine. Face facts. With Roland a victim of his own folly, we have to make the decisions now, and I say the river is our best bet." And with that, Cuthbert starts wading into the water, with Elaine following closely behind with the two horses and Roland's lifeless body. Cuthbert remarks that Elaine simply doesn't want to do strenuous activities, and Elaine in turn quips that we'll get to see Cuthbert's prowess today. Ah, the youthful pride. That element of young age that makes you eat your own words so you can learn a valuable life lesson. It doesn't take long for Cuthbert to catch a rogue rapid as he soon begins to drown. Unable to keep his head above the water, Bert lets out a last cry for help before stretching out his hand. Thankfully, before the river can take him, Elaine comes to his rescue and saves him using a thick and sturdy branch that he had supposedly found lying around. That's what he tells Cuthbert, at least. In reality, Elaine had foreseen this happening, and so he had begun to look for this branch as soon as he had ensured their horses and Roland's safety. As Cuthbert emerges from the water, Elaine jokingly says, if it's any consolation, "I stand in awe of your prowess." Bert begrudgingly says that he didn't need any help, and this is when Elaine slyly points to the left. When Bert takes a look, he realizes he was seconds away from falling to his death because just a few steps away is a huge waterfall. The three young gunslingers from Gilead do indeed have a lot to deal with, but they're not the only young warriors this story is about. Hamry, too, has lent us a young warrior for this tale of destinies. Young Shimi, who, until just a few moments ago, was hot on the trail of Clay Reynolds and his posse. Shimi has been through his own fair share of trials since this tale began. Firstly, he's busy blaming himself for Susan Delgado's death. After all, he couldn't protect her from those who meant her harm. It's the reason he still clutches a fallen lock of her hair as if it were Susan herself. Secondly, he can't help but curse himself for being a simpleton. Thirdly, Shimi desperately wishes that the world was different, that he was different. As it becomes clearer to Shimi that he's lost, he says out loud, "Oh, Shimi in it now, yes he is. He go messy it all up, which is what he always does. Maybe I should go back." But back to what? To where? To who? And having decided that there's no turning back now, Shimi twists his body and crosses the barbed wire fencing in front of him. He fails to notice the sign above that reads, "Welcome to Dogan." Shimi continues to convince himself that going back to Hamry will only mean more trouble as he makes his way deeper into what is seemingly a huge, abandoned, and dilapidated factory. As this happens, our narrator tells us that the soldiers aren't the biggest casualty of wars, it's those innocents that get caught in the crossfire. Innocents like Shimi. Shimi has no guns, no horse, and no training, yet that doesn't matter to him as he lowers himself into a destroyed hatch door so that he can venture deeper into the facility. Shimi has no quartet, no friends. Hell, he doesn't even have a properly functioning brain, yet he ventures deeper. Make no mistake, this isn't fate or destiny, but the long, twisted arm of John Farson and the Red King drawing him in. When Shimi has reached the lower floor of the Dogan, he's face to face with the mummified and mutilated remains of a man attached to some sort of mechanical contraption powered by an unknown electrical source. The sight is ungodly and horrifying, and Shimi begins to ramble out of fear. He tells the lifeless body his name, his duties, and how he's been treated all his life. Then, slowly, he begins to bring up the fact that the man doesn't look that good and hopes that if he is alive, he isn't offended by the words. Eventually, he says, "Are you dead? Like Pretty Susan is dead? I'm like to feel sick to my insides about pretty Saw Susan, like to die myself. So, if you ain't dead, then maybe I can help you stay ain't dead, the way I couldn't help Saw Susan." Despite this, it takes 20 minutes for Shimi to finally approach the corpse and pry it away from the restraints, 20 minutes of making promises to a mummified corpse. When Shimi finally tugs on the corpse's arm, something in the background stirs. Shimi fails to notice the broken screen that briefly flashes the word "activate" because he's distracted by the ungodly sight of an abomination staring right into his soul. Shimi wants to scream, but his own voice seems to have forsaken him in this moment of terror. The Long Road Home, Issue number 2, Orphans of War. What is it about war that makes children the ones who often wind up suffering? I don't know. I purely don't. While men in mansions make decisions about life and death, it's always the children who get caught in the crossfire, which is kind of odd if you think about it, because it's their futures the wars are supposedly being fought for. They get their houses blown up, they lose their parents, their siblings are dragged away to be tortured or worse, and sometimes to be experimented on, something that's currently happening with Shimi as he desperately tries to claw his way out of the robot's grasp. He begs for mercy, blabbers incessantly, yet the robot who pours electricity into his mouth doesn't utter a word. Maybe because the robot wasn't programmed with any answers, or maybe because there aren't any. Shimi is just another orphan of war now, at the mercy of creatures that know no mercy, caught up in plans he can't possibly understand. Children like Shimi were once called victims or casualties, but in today's world, they're termed acceptable losses, as if you're talking about a man's receding hairline and not the life of a child. We then switch to Roland as he drifts through the miasma of Maryland's grapefruit. Roland is of the second kind of children caught up in a war, the kind that wages it. As Roland drifts aimlessly, a familiar yet different voice calls out to him. Soon, branches and unseen forces begin drawing him closer to the voice. Roland tries to fight these forces, as the voice says, "You have sown the wind, Roland, son of Stephen, of the line of Eld. Now, as one typically must, under such circumstances, you must reap the whirlwind." Roland orders the voice to release him this instant, and that's when it begins to cackle. The next second, Roland is slammed forcefully into the ground below, and this is when a crow reveals itself. It taunts and mocks Roland for entertaining the idea that he might have free will in this realm. This realm is the Thunderclap, the first region of the End World. Roland is baffled by the crow. He questions who dares taunt him, and this is when the crow laughs again and reveals himself to be Martin Broadcloak. Martin taunts Roland and gloats that he has controlled the young gunslinger's every move since his time in Gilead. Roland's rush to manhood, his hasted rise as a gunslinger, his lengthy absence from Gilead were all part of Martin's plans. This is when we switch back to Elaine and Cuthbert as they once again butt heads at the edge of a rickety bridge. Elaine thinks it's a stupid idea to cross it with their horses and an incapacitated Roland, but Bert sees an opportunity here. If they can somehow make it across, they can sever the bridge, which will render Clay Reynolds and his posse incapable of pursuing them any further. The small risk is well worth the reward it promises. Elaine brings up the fact that getting the horses across would be the toughest task, and this is when Bert challenges him. If Cuthbert can get the horses across, then Elaine would follow with Roland, and Elaine is forced to agree with him. True to his word, Cuthbert manages to get Elaine and Roland's steed to cross the bridge rather easily. Only his steed remains, and Cuthbert's steed is known to be the most skittish amongst their horses. Elaine worries for his friend as he watches Bert slowly lead his mount across the rickety bridge. The horse whines and neighs with each eroded plank they pass, and as expected, halfway through, it begins to panic. Bert tries to calm the creature, he tries to hold on to the reins, and finally manages to reach the end. But then, his mount betrays him. It begins to panic again, and this time, when it rears, it breaks its foreleg just above the fetlock when it brings it down. Elaine knows what's about to happen, and Bert doesn't need to be told twice. With a heavy heart, Bert looks his horse in the eyes and says, "I know, I'm sorry, girl. I should have done better by you. Wait for me at the clearing at the end of the road, and when I eventually arrive, we'll ride together again." And then, bam! A gunshot echoes through the canyon, followed by the limp and lifeless body of Cuthbert's horse falling into it. Elaine then begins to cross the bridge with Roland's limp body, and this is when he makes the mistake of wishing for Roland to wake up because it would make his life a whole lot easier. Suddenly, Roland does wake up, still under the influence of the grapefruit, and screams, "Damn you, Martin! This is for your schemes!" Roland then punches Elaine across the face under the impression that he is Martin, and this sends the satchel with Marilyn's grapefruit flying out of Elaine's hands. With the speed of a cornered snake, Elaine quickly reacts and manages to catch the satchel. If he hadn't been trained as a gunslinger, the grapefruit would have been lost, but this is the least of his worries, because the next second, Roland loses his footing and falls from the bridge. For a second time, Elaine manages to save the day, and after having grabbed onto Roland's foot, he says, "My own damned fault. I had to say I wish you were awake without specifying the details." Roland falls unconscious once again, and this allows Elaine to drag him back up and take him across the bridge. Cuthbert quickly cuts the ropes, and as the three of them ride away, they can hear Clay Reynolds cursing in the background. Bert fires a few shots in their direction, just for fun, although none of them manage to find a target. As for Reynolds, this battle is over. The nearest crossing is at least 100 miles due east, which means that pursuing the boys is no longer something they can do. He decides to join forces with Farson back in Hamry, because when Gilead falls, he plans to kill the three of them before anyone else. Back in the Dogan, Shimi wakes up to find that the robot who was torturing him has finally shut itself off. Shimi doesn't understand what has happened and simply decides to leave the Dogan. Meanwhile, we the reader are given a closer look at the robot where the words North Central Positronics as well as Psychic Enhancer Assistant are etched into the metal, and by nightfall, he reaches the canyon where Bert and Elaine severed the bridge. As he stares across the canyon, his eyes begin to glow, and then, in an instant, Shimi has traveled across the gaping canyon, alone but for his mule. The Long Road Home, issue number 3. Life is just a dream once lived. Roland now wakes up in Marilyn's grapefruit, disoriented and completely livid. Roland has been here for so long that his sense of reality has begun to warp. He begins to believe that this might actually be his true reality and that the life he lived may have just been a pretty dream. In front of him is an almost dead Billy Bumbler impaled on a sharp piece of wood. Roland steadies himself, and this is when the Billy Bumbler begins to utter the word Roland again and again. What Roland doesn't realize is that this is Oy, his companion from the future, and that he is currently witnessing snippets of his fate. This is when a man in a cloak and a cowboy hat appears, and Martin begins to mock Roland. He speaks in riddles, and when Roland ignores Martin and angrily tells the man to reveal his identity, Martin laughs and tells him that the man can't hear him, and that's because he's Roland from the future. Martin says, "He is you, Roland, walking an endless road to its end. An end that you will find and lose in the Dark Tower." Roland dismissively calls Martin a crow, which forces the wizard to correct him because he's a raven. Roland ignores Martin, continues to call him a crow, and then says, "Anyway, that can't be me, for that man is alone. No friends, no quartet." And the wizard once again laughs and tells Roland, "Oh, you had them, but they all lie dead, and their blood is on your hands. Know you why 'tis called a murder of crows? Because sometimes the flock will kill a dying crow in its midst. No mercy for the weak. They were all weak, Roland. Your quartet was your flock, and you murdered them, one by one." Roland has had enough of the crow and his mockery. He pulls out his gun and tries to shoot the bird, but suddenly his firearm vanishes right out of his hands. He tries to strangle the crow with his bare hands, and this is when Martin grows to an enormous size and says, "Call me crow one more time, and I'll rip your damned intestines out." The crow grabs Roland by the shoulders and flies off. Meanwhile, Cuthbert and Elaine have set up camp in the middle of nowhere. Cuthbert pesters Elaine to get a read on Roland using his touch, but Elaine knows that's not going to work. This is when Roland wakes up fighting and screaming, his soul still trapped inside Marilyn's grapefruit. Cuthbert tries to wake up Roland by calling out to him, but Elaine warns against it because if Roland's body ends up truly waking up, then his soul might get severed and trapped inside the grapefruit forever. Cuthbert doesn't know what to make of this mumbo-jumbo, but he believes his friend, so he decides that restraining Roland and taking turns keeping an eye on him is the best they can do for now. Elaine then decides that he's going to try a more aggressive approach to save Roland, a more risky method that might leave them both trapped in the grapefruit forever. Elaine pulls out the grapefruit, holds it against his chest, and then reaches out to Roland and performs toe dash, a long-rumored ability of the Manny. And with that, Elaine vanishes and enters the grapefruit, leaving behind a big ball of living lightning. Bert waits for Elaine. He hopes the time works differently in the grapefruit, hopes that his friends will be back any second, but when an hour goes by, he begins to fear the worst. He begins to prepare for the future, a future where he might return to Gilead all on his own, but this is when his worries of the future are cut short by the pained cries of one of their horses. Bert pulls out his revolver and rushes towards the horses, only to find himself face to face with a muty wolf. Bert kills the creature in an instant, but now, unfortunately, they have lost yet another horse. Elaine, meanwhile, is now in the grapefruit and is mastered flying in its realm. He quickly finds Roland in the clutches of Martin, who's alerted to his presence by the sound of his bells. Elaine manages to grab onto Roland. He tries to pull his friend free, but Roland simply tells Elaine to leave him behind and exit the grapefruit for his own sake. This is when Martin reveals his true face, and Roland mocks him by saying that he has only provided Roland a bigger target to shoot. Martin, however, says, "True face? What makes you think I have one, Roland?" Martin then uses his powers in the realm and stops Elaine from flying, which causes him to plummet toward the ground. Elaine comes out of the grapefruit, but then tries to go back in again almost instantly. Bert tries to stop him by reaching out for the grapefruit, but unfortunately, he's too slow. The lightning blast occurs again, which sends Bert flying halfway across the camp through the campfire. He smacks against a tree, which sends his gun flying. Bert eventually gets up and puts out the fire on his arm by rolling on the ground. Unfortunately, by the time he gathers his bearings and turns around, a muty wolf is snarling on top of Roland's unconscious body. Bert frantically starts scrambling for his gun, and this is when Roland's body wakes up possessed by some unnatural power. He breaks his restraints as if they were but threads, and then, in one swift motion, grabs the wolf and snaps its neck. Bert is elated, but when Roland looks at him as if his turn's next, Bert stops dead in his tracks. Thankfully, though, whatever power possessed Roland then leaves, and he falls unconscious once again. Elaine, meanwhile, has been returned to the grapefruit at the exact spot where he last left it, which means that he's plummeting to his death again. Elaine concentrates and manages to stop his fall mere inches from the ground. He then screams for Martin Broadcloak, which causes him to be sent back into the real world once again. He tells Bert about Martin and how he's holding Roland's soul hostage, but before he can say more, Bert tells him to turn around because they're about to be attacked by an entire pack of muty wolves. The Long Road Home, issue number 4, Unlikely Savior. The assault by the muty wolf pack is nothing short of brutal, but our two gunslingers aren't far behind either. Bert quickly ducks out of the way as Elaine fires off his revolver. He manages to drop 3 of the beasts, but this is when a 4th attacks him from behind and latches on to his right arm. Elaine drops his gun, and Bert uses this chance to distract the wolf by throwing a rock at it. When the muty wolf attacks him, Bert stabs him in the snout with his knife and kills it. When another wolf is inches away from killing Elaine, Bert is forced to grab Roland's gun, and he doesn't feel good about it. Using another gunslinger's guns is like stepping into their personal private space, but Bert does what needs to be done and shoots the last wolf through the head using Roland's weapon. He rushes to Elaine and helps bandage his arm, but this is when he hears someone approaching their location, and without looking, Bert fires off 2 shots in the dark. To their dismay, a small figure staggers out of the dark. It's Shimi, and he says, "What for are you shooting Shimi? Is this because I let poor Miss Susan get all burned? I guess so. Bad Shimi had it coming, yes he did. Maybe you should be shooting me again so I never forget how bad I was. Shimi gonna take a little lie down now. Well, remembering, okay? Okay." Meanwhile, in the grapefruit, Martin is flying Roland to the Crimson King's abode, La Casse Roi Rousse. Roland continues to be rebellious, and so when he asks Martin to drop him this time, Martin drops him in a nest made of thorns. He then terrorizes Roland with tales of the Crimson King, and once he's happy, he grabs Roland back up and this time tosses him in front of the king himself. The king says, "Greetings, cousin, greetings, and welcome. I am the Eater of Worlds." Meanwhile, back in the real world, Cuthbert is inconsolable as he gently grabs Shimi's head and assesses his wounds. Bert frantically apologizes to the little kid as he says, "I shot without thinking. I've forgotten the face of my father, and this poor idiot boy pays the price for my lapse. I'll never forgive myself for—" But before Bert can complete his sentence, Shimi's body begins to glow, and then he begins to get up. Both the gunslingers are surprised and caught off guard, because when Shimi speaks to them, his voice is different. It's calmer and wise. Shimi looks at Elaine with his glowing eyes and hands and says, "You're hurt. Can't have you hurt. Won't do. Remove the bandages, please." And then, using his psychic powers, Shimi heals Elaine. It's a good thing too, because Elaine's wounds had been infected. If they hadn't been treated, the poison would have eventually reached his heart, which would have killed him. Bert hugs Shimi once he's finished the miraculous healing process. Bert doesn't know what to make of this, but they're all desperate, and so he sheepishly tells Shimi, "Roland's soul is trapped in this damnable sphere. You think you can free him?" And Shimi wisely replies, "Won't know until I try." And thus, while Shimi takes over the sphere, he watches as Roland faces the Crimson King himself. Roland mocks the Crimson King, but the World Eater knows better. He knows that Roland is scared, and this flippancy is simply an attempt to hide his fear. Martin then screams for Roland to take a knee. It's simply unacceptable for Roland to not kneel before the Crimson King, and so, when Roland refuses, Martin begins to attack him over and over again in his crow form. Eventually, the Crimson King asks Martin to stop because violence is simply not the way to reach out to Roland, and so, when the Dark Wizard backs off, we see Roland covered in gashes from Martin's claws. The Crimson King then mocks Roland for not knowing his purpose, for not truly knowing the danger he's in. Meanwhile, on the outside, Shimi has watched all of this unfold, and instead of answering Bert or Elaine's questions, he simply gets on his mule and tells them, "I do see Roland. I see him, evil, and me." Elaine frantically asks Shimi, "You see you? How is that possible?" And Shimi doesn't know how to answer that. He doesn't know why he sees himself in the sphere, but he knows one thing for sure: he isn't supposed to be here. And with that declaration, Shimi urges his mule forward, and with one simple leap, the simpleton and his mule enter Marilyn's grapefruit, leaving Cuthbert and Elaine more perplexed and dumbfounded than ever. Upon entering the grapefruit, Shimi laments the fact that this is all Roland gets. He should have a knight in shining armor coming to save him, but instead, all he gets is a simple boy on his mule. Shimi then says, "But I'll do my best, or die trying." Actually, no "or" there, more like an "and." And thus begins Shimi's journey to save Roland's life. The Long Road Home, issue number 5. Lost. The Crimson King is still being gentle with Roland, and so when he asks why the World Eater keeps calling him cousin, the Crimson King reveals the truth. Roland may be a descendant of Arthur Eld, but the Crimson King is his direct descendant. The Crimson King is the son of Arthur Eld. To repopulate the world, Arthur Eld bedded many women, and one of them was the Crimson Queen, the World Eater's mother. The Crimson King then spreads his arms, flexes his spider limbs, and proclaims to Roland, "Do you begin to understand, cousin? I am no usurper. I simply want what is rightfully mine, a kingdom restored to the glorious chaos that existed before the Dark Tower spun coherent worlds from a web of disorder, a time when rules meant nothing and nothing meant everything. The Crimson King goes on to ramble about his perfect future and how the guns that Roland will inherit from his father are the key to accomplishing this future because they originated from within the tower. But Roland isn't impressed. He calls the Crimson King insane and says, "These are the insane ravings of a lunatic who has lived far too long." And this is when the Crimson King loses his patience and begins to torture Roland, tremors of which are felt by Shimi, who isn't far away. Shimi makes his way towards the castle, while the Crimson King proclaims that Roland cannot be reasoned with, which means it's time to end him. However, before he can make his move, Shimi arrives and uses his power on the Crimson King, which knocks him down. By the time the World Eater recovers, Roland has already fled with Shimi, and before Martin can stop them in his raven form, the two leave Merlin's grapefruit. Roland wakes up in Midworld, and Bert runs to his aid. But as they begin to converse, it becomes quite clear that Roland doesn't remember much of what happened inside the grapefruit. In fact, he has trouble remembering his savior, Shimi. Elaine returns from scouting, and he too is disheartened to learn that Shimi didn't exit the grapefruit, at least not with Roland. They decide to wait until morning for Shimi, and Roland offers to take watch while his friends get some much-needed sleep. However, Roland never specified what he would be watching, and so, once his friends are asleep, he pulls out the grapefruit and stares into it for the rest of the night. This wooden-faced, glassy-eyed creature in front of us, it doesn't have much of Roland left in it at all. The next morning, the boys leave for Gilead. Roland on his horse and his friends on foot. They barely talk for the rest of the journey, and it doesn't take long for Bert and Elaine to notice that Roland is not himself. When they reach Gilead, Roland carefully puts the grapefruit in one of his saddlebags, a move that doesn't go unnoticed. Bert confronts him about it, but Roland's nonchalant response tells the boys that Roland doesn't plan on handing over the grapefruit to his father. But when they reach the entrance of Gilead, they find the flags at half-mast and soon discover that Farson's men lied to their fathers and proclaimed that their boys had died. The entire city stops mourning and celebrates upon learning the truth, and Stephen Deschain struggles to contain himself in front of everyone when he sees Roland's face. He can see something is wrong with Roland, but he was the one who set him down this path, and so all Stephen says to his son is this: "As your father, I could ask no more of you, yet it's evident that you are much changed, and not for the better. I bear that responsibility. Over hasty to grow up you may have been, but I should have given you a swift kick to hurry you on that path. I cry your pardon." Roland tells his father that past is past and that it would do them no good to dwell on it, and this is when Stephen notices the saddlebag Roland clutches so desperately. He asks his son about it, but Roland lies to him and doesn't tell him about the grapefruit. Elaine and Cuthbert desperately want to reveal the truth, but in the end, they decide not to betray their quartet, and so that night, after having lied to his father, Roland sits in his room in the dark, staring into the grapefruit once again. Bert and Elaine know one thing for sure. Their brother, in all but blood, Roland, was left behind somewhere on the long road home, and he ain't never coming back. Treachery, issue number 1. Traitors. The return of Roland's quartet has caused celebrations across Gilead. It's been a week, but the entire city is buzzing with the news of their arrival, and every boy and farmhand is dreaming of becoming a gunslinger one day. It's a momentous occasion, an occasion only sneered at by the servants and the chefs of the Great Hall who are forced to prepare a feast, where the boys have now earned the right to be called gunslingers. And so, Stephen Deschain, father of Roland and Lord of Gilead, now stands alongside other gunslingers in the Great Hall in front of Elaine and Cuthbert as he says, "Congratulations, boys. You've remembered the faces of your fathers. The council's verdict is unanimous. This day you've earned your guns and the right to be called gunslingers. Go now and live your lives with the maturity and level-headedness that your new status dictates." And so, Elaine and Cuthbert leap through the fields and celebrate with their friends Whitman and DeCurry, while the other apprentices, however, feel jilted. At least Roland had to face court to get his guns, yet Elaine and Cuthbert have seemingly been handed the title on a silver platter for simply tagging along. This doesn't sit well with them, and one of them chucks a rock, which hits Elaine in the back of the head. Bert steps in to prevent a fight, and then explains to Elaine that there's no point fighting an already lost battle because they were outnumbered. They may have faced bigger odds before and prevailed because they had no choice, but picking up an already lost fight is just plain stupid. And then, when they arrive at their home, the word cheater has been written on their front door. The boys decide that they should tell Roland about what's going on, only to find him lost in the grapefruit once again. They're forced to peer in through the keyhole, and upon realizing what's happening, they begin to second-guess their decision of backing up Roland in front of his father. Meanwhile, inside the grapefruit, Roland is being drawn to the tower, and he finds himself at the Can Ka no Rei, aka the Red Fields of None, for the first time. There, a mysterious voice welcomes him, and Roland assumes that it's the tower talking to him. Suddenly, the roses begin to blacken and rot all around him, and he then begins to notice the stench of rotting meat in the air. The voice, however, welcomes this rot, and this is when it's revealed that it wasn't the tower talking to him, it was the Crimson King, who leaps from one of the balconies of the tower to attack Roland. He breaks through rocks during his leap, and this is when Roland's fear aids him in leaving the grapefruit. He wakes up furiously and quickly covers the sphere because Roland now realizes the error of his ways. At first, he thinks he should give the sphere to his father, but then quickly decides against it. For what if his father becomes addicted to it too? Roland decides to keep and protect the sphere for the sake of his father. Meanwhile, while Elaine and Bert are busy cleaning their door, they notice their fathers and other gunslingers leaving Gilead. Stephen Deschain is leading his men to attack Farson's forces that are too close to Gilead, and a man named Justice, who is seemingly a scout, is showing them the way. The party in question, meanwhile, is having second doubts about working for Farson. A man named Wells is especially vocal because he doesn't want more blood on his hands, and then, in an instant, they're attacked by the gunslingers, and the men fall like flies. Only a single voice is able to drown out the barrage of gunshots, a voice that screams for mercy. Stephen Deschain approaches the man and vows to let him live if he'll give them information about Farson. But this is when the man reveals that he tricked them, pulls out a grenade, tosses it at them, and escapes as it explodes a second later. This is when he's confronted by Justice, and we learn that he works for Farson. The plan at first was to lead Stephen and the gunslingers here so they could be ambushed, but then the plan was changed by Farson, and he allowed the gunslingers to have this false victory. Justice then kills the only survivor because this is where Farson planned for him to be dead. Treachery. Issue number 2, Daughter. Nothing starts the day better than some shooting practice. Cuthbert and Elaine, along with their friends Jamie DeCurry and Thomas Whitman, are busy practicing and shooting at a buffalo skull that has Farson's name written all over it. Once done, the boys express their anger for Farson and how they find it wasteful to use ammo on a buffalo skull when they could be out there fighting his forces. Jamie then mentions Roland. The guy hasn't been shown up for practice, and this is when Bert quickly cuts in and tells Jamie and Thomas that Roland is sick. Jamie then mentions the coming-of-age feast tomorrow night and how it would be a real shame if Roland were to miss it. This is when Elaine gives Bert a look that is sure to haunt his dreams, and the two of them have no choice but to simply agree with Thomas and Jamie to let the discussion end. Meanwhile, little do they know that a girl with the spirit of a gunslinger has been keeping a close eye on them all morning. This is Eileen Ritter, niece of Court, the formidable trainer of young prospective gunslingers. If it were up to Court, he would see her betrothed to Roland in an instant, but if it was up to Eileen, she would rather die than marry someone. Her dreams are those of a gunslinger, and though most days she would struggle with these thoughts and fight to contain them, today is not most days. And so, Eileen swipes the key to the armory from Court and then opens the door. She sighs when she lays her eyes on all the guns, and she carefully addresses each one of them before finally making her choice. She holsters her chosen gun and then heads towards the boys as they practice some more. Bert is busy gloating and showing off to Jamie and Thomas, which is why he fails to notice Eileen, who's headed towards them. Thomas and Jamie decide that this is the perfect time to prank Bert, and so they challenge him. Thomas suddenly screams, "Cuthbert, a challenge! Hit the target dead center left-handed with your right arm belted to your side, and I'll do your chores for a week. If you fail, you'll do mine." Bert is too high on testosterone and adrenaline right now to listen to Elaine's warnings, and so, when he removes his holster and tries to belt his right arm, he ends up losing his pants because he's lost a lot of weight since their journey to Hamry. Bert bends down to pick up his pants while chiding the others for laughing like little children, when suddenly, he's confronted by Eileen, who's standing right behind him. Cuthbert lets out a soft cry of shock, and this is when Jamie tosses his holster back to him. Bert catches the holster out of reflex, and this is when his pants fall down once again. An enraged Bert then challenges the three boys to a standoff, and this is when Eileen takes offense because she wasn't challenged. Bert angrily tells her, You have no business being here at all, Eileen. No girl does." Bert then decides that the three of them are not worth wasting ammo on, and he simply storms off. This is when Eileen takes aim and shoots the gun belt in his hand to prove her point. She then says, "How about now, Bert? Am I worth it now?" Which terrifies you more, that a girl might be worthy of the title gunslinger, or that she might be even more worthy than you. I'll wager a near death pales in comparison to those prospects. Eileen is kind of right, because death is quite close for a gunslinger not far from them. Stephen Deschain was saved from the grenade when a young Charles Champignon jumped in front of him to save his life at the cost of his own. Now the ground is thick with his blood, and it's hard to believe he has much more left to give. Stephen, Chris Johns, and Robert Allgood attend to his wounds, while the rest take off to get some much-needed help that the three of them are sure Charles won't be alive to see. Seeing as they're in a pickle, Stephen decides it's time for some drastic measures. He pulls out a bullet, removes its cap using his knife, and then pours the gunpowder all over Charles's wounds. After warning the young gunslinger of what he's about to do, Stephen sets it ablaze. Charles screams, his body spasms, but in the end, the procedure helps cauterize his wounds, albeit he does pass out from the pain. This is when Stephen suddenly pulls out his gun and points it toward the shadows, and then Justice walks out. Stephen asks about the blood staining Justice's hands, and the traitor manipulates Stephen by telling him that he had to kill one of Farson's men. Eileen, meanwhile, is heartbroken. She sheds tears because what Bert said has stabbed her deep in her heart, but then Eileen remembers that gunslingers don't cry. Tears are the mark of a weak girl, which she is not. Eileen wipes her tears away and then takes the oath of the gunslingers, albeit with a few minor changes tailored to her preferences. I do not aim with my eye. She who aims with her eye has forgotten the face of her mother. I aim with my hand. I do not shoot with my hand. She who shoots with her hand has forgotten the face of her mother. I shoot with my mind. I do not kill with my gun. She who kills with her gun has forgotten the face of her mother. I kill with my heart. And with that, Eileen takes aim and destroys the buffalo skull from almost double the distance that the boys were shooting from. Treachery, issue number 3. Prophecy. The first thing that strikes the eye when you look at this tower will be the numerous stone guardians. This is the Our Lady of the Rose in Debaria, a convent in the barony of New Canaan, and they worship Gan. Legend has it that if anyone approaches the nunnery with so much as an impure thought, one or more of the statues will spring to life and crush the life out of you. The statues depict various animals, like an elephant, a bat, an eagle, a jaguar, a tortoise, a wolf, a fish, a rabbit, and a few others. Each guardian protects a separate entrance of the nunnery with an individual path that leads to the central tower. It's a symbolic tower where the sisters worship Gan, whose dominion is the formidable Dark Tower. And then there's the single cold building in the northwest corner. Outside is the statue of a weeping woman with the words, "Repent ye who enter here," carved on top. Some swear that if you listen quietly, you can hear the statue sobbing in perpetual grief, or maybe, somehow, it's absorbed years' worth of lamentations of those who dwell within. The dark, cold, stone dwelling is a retreat for noble women who have brought disgrace upon themselves and seek penance. Among its denizens, there are fewer who are more noble or more disgraced than Gabrielle Deschain, mother of Roland and betrayer of her husband, Stephen Deschain. She works tirelessly on a loom, and the only other sound in the room is her occasional sobbing when they manage to betray her grief. During one such weak moment, a sister enters her room and asks, "Art thou crying, a little sister? Excellent. Sorrow cleanses and brightens the soul." And then Gabrielle Deschain speaks very softly under her breath, too slow for the sister to hear, then mine should be positively scintillating. The sister then leads Gabrielle to the friar's chamber for her final confession. Meanwhile, in Gilead, another confession has set court abuzz, a confession from Eileen. She has told her uncle that she stole the keys to the armory to arm herself, and while court is livid about this, Eileen says, "I had to steal them. It's not as if they'd ever give them to me." Court then tries to change the topic and asks Eileen why she's dressed like a boy, but Eileen is in no mood for this. She tells Court that if he likes skirts so much, he should wear them himself, and this angers Court, who threatens to beat her just like a boy if she so desperately wants to be one. Eileen retorts, "If that's the only measure of equality I warrant, then I'll take the beating and be grateful for the opportunity." Court loses it upon hearing this. He screams at Eileen that he's trying to betroth her to Roland Deschain, the future Din of Gilead, but for some reason, Eileen cannot make up her mind about who or what she is. And this is when Eileen defiantly replies, "You're wrong, uncle. In the fire of my heart and the skill of my hand, I'm a gunslinger, just as you taught me to be." Court tries to explain to her that as her only living relative, he taught her these skills so that she could protect herself in case something happens to him. But Eileen argues that why should she just be the protected when she could be the protector? She has the skills, and she has the heart of a gunslinger, so why should she hold herself back? Court has begun to break by now, and Eileen reaches into the bottom of her heart and says, "Is this the fate that my dead mother, your sister, would have wanted for me? Answer me truly, uncle, and I will abide by your opinion." At that, Court smiles, hugs Eileen, and says, "Nay, you won't. Just like your mother, you're a lousy liar. You'll be what you'll be. I'll be what you, and what Gan, who gave me a keen eye, made me. Then we'll leave it to him to decide what to do with ye, to Gan, and to Stephen Deschain when he gets back." And with that, we switch to Stephen Deschain as he, along with the other gunslingers, journey back to Gilead. He's concerned about Charles, who has begun to bleed again, but Charles tells him not to worry because he's still a gunslinger. They continue their conversation, and through it, we learn that Charles's wife is about to give birth. He's hoping it's a boy. Charles and his wife think that the baby should be here any day now. However, their midwife begs to differ, who thinks there's still a month left. Meanwhile, in Debaria, as the sister leads Gabrielle to the friar, she admires the butterflies, which surprises Gabrielle, and so the sister asks her about it, and Gabrielle says, "I did not mean to offend, sister. You just never seemed one to appreciate casual beauty." And this is when the sister angrily corrects Gabrielle, for she doesn't like butterflies for their beauty, she likes them for what they represent, the potential for transformation from something small and crawling to something of luminous glory. The sister then says, "Let thy sinning spirit be similarly transformed, and all will be well. Enter and make your confession." And with that, Gabrielle enters the friar's chambers and instantly begins to shiver uncontrollably. She tries to shake the discomfort and talks to the friar. She confesses her sins. However, this is when the friar reaches out with his gangly, morose fingers and reveals himself. It's none other than Martin Broadcloak, in disguise, who instantly grips Gabrielle, and once again, she falls under his spell. Cheating pervades the air this day, whether it's Gabrielle cheating on Stephen once more, or the whispers of cheaters back in Gilead as Elaine and Bert walk past other apprentices. Bert once again begins to rant about how they've earned their guns, that the others don't know the ordeal they were put through. However, Elaine quickly redirects this anger towards Roland, who has been spending countless hours festering with Marilyn's grapefruit. The two of them have had enough of Roland and his ramblings. They decide that they're going to take the grapefruit away from him, whether he likes it or not, and hand it over to his father. Elaine then says, "It's what he swore he was going to do anyway. We're just helping him keep his word. That's all. You think he'll see it that way? Not a chance." And so, we head to Roland's room, where the stench of decay presides over every nook and cranny. Like a stinking addict, the emaciated Roland holds onto the grapefruit for dear life. His scrawniness comes from not eating. The stench comes from not bathing, because Roland has simply been lying there, cradling and protecting the sphere like a mother protecting her infant. His mind still wanders the grapefruit, and in it, he sees a horrifying figure traveling across the desert, soaring high over the Zay River canyons, reeking of evil, and heading towards Gilead to perform Farson's deadly mischief. He sees Rhea, witch of the Coos, and unfortunately, she's headed for Gilead. Covered in sores and festering boils, Rhea enters his father's chambers. As he pores over the battle maps, Roland begins to scream, "Father, death comes for you on spider's legs. Turn away from the battle maps and plans you're dealing with to deal with Farson, and see that the war has come to your innermost sanctum." But it's as if Roland's voice has no power here. It doesn't seem to reach his father. Rhea approaches him like a stalking animal and then begins to strangle him. Roland continues to scream. He continues to try and save his father, but to no avail. And then, with one final pull, Rhea decapitates Stephen Deschain, and his head now hangs from a string in her hand. Treachery. Issue number 4, A Single Error. In utter silence, Martin and Gabrielle now leave the walls of Debaria behind. The night is as dark as ever, and the trees appear mangled, just like Gabrielle's life and her ledger of sins. She asks Martin what they're supposed to do now, and the Dark Wizard says, "When flight is not an option, then only fight is left. We must fight the mighty beast that is the Gunslingers." Gabrielle, disheartened, thinks that this is an impossible task, but Martin eventually convinces her by dangling his love in front of her. He convinces her to take Stephen's life, and Gabrielle has no choice but to lament her life, which is now full of sins. She has reluctantly agreed to do the deed, but she hasn't forgotten about Roland. And this is when Martin falsely promises her that Roland will be safe. He says, "He will live to an old age and die peacefully if I have aught to say about it. Of that, you have my word." Little does Gabrielle know that Martin has his fingers crossed behind his back. Martin then faces her and stands intimately close and confirms if she's ready to do the job. Gabrielle, still under the impression that Martin dearly loves her, ponders over the irony of the act she's about to commit. Martin then tells her, "Return to Gilead by nightfall. "A messenger shall reach you anon with a weapon to do the deed." The two then kiss, and Martin keeps a close eye on Gabrielle until her form vanishes into the dark as she nears the horizon. Then, and only then, Martin allows himself a soft and amused chuckle. Meanwhile, Roland, deep in the grasp of the grapefruit, still peers into its mysterious machinations and watches Rhea of the Coos face to face with his father's decapitated head. He then watches as the witch with spider legs begins to move once again, and this time she's headed for Roland's chambers. Little does he know that Bert and Elaine beeline for his chambers at that same time. Elaine doesn't like what they're doing. He doesn't want to steal from Roland, but Cuthbert is as brash as ever, and he wants to get this job done and be over it as soon as possible. Roland watches intently as Rhea reaches the door to his chambers and reaches out. He is deluded and has made himself believe that Rhea of the Coos is a simpleton who will allow herself to be ambushed by him while he peers into pure evil. Instead, Bert slowly opens the door to his chambers. Elaine tries to stop him because he wants to hear what Roland is rambling about, but Bert doesn't listen to him. And so, as Bert takes a single step into the room, Roland wakes up from his slumber and his ramblings become a bit clearer. "Did you think to catch me unaware, hag? Or perhaps see me crumble in tears over the foul deed before me? You are betrayed by the very globe you coveted, and with that betrayal comes the only just penalty, death." Roland then pulls out his gun and pulls the trigger instantly, and in that moment, Elaine is the only one who holds the hand of reason. He forces Bert to duck by jumping on him and saves his friend's life. Meanwhile, deep inside the keep, a very much alive Stephen Deschain and the other gunslingers discuss the best way to outflank Farson and his men. The only problem is the fact that they still trust Justice, who's pretending to be a scout in their employ who actually works for Farson himself. We learn that Farson and his forces have reached the borders of New Canaan, and Justice is using this opportunity to sow some fear amongst the gunslingers with his right hand while offering some false hope with his left. Justice says, "Sometimes I swear that when the wind blows from the south, it carries the howls of his victims. Remember you the horrors of Crescia, where Farson razed and burned the barony seat of Indri, staked the heads of the mayor and sheriff upon spikes, and slaughtered those who were loyal to the affiliation? Well, Indri was merely a warm-up for his current reign of terror." The gunslingers seem unfazed, and this is when Justice steers the tide of conversation and offers them a solution instead. Roland and his quartet dealt Farson a substantial blow in Hamry, and the gunslingers can exploit that by launching a surprise attack on his mountain arsenal where guards are sorely depleted. At least, according to Justice. Stephen thanks Justice for the substantial advice and then dismisses the meeting because it's quite late. But as everyone leaves, Stephen stops Charles and advises him to look after his wife. She's about to give birth any time now, and he's in no shape to protect her or himself in case something were to happen. Charles doesn't like this, but he heeds Stephen's advice nonetheless, and the last thing the Din of Gilead tells him is, "Just have a care, Charles. There's treachery everywhere nowadays." Roland was damn fortunate that his father and the other gunslingers were deep inside the keep discussing their battle plans and not anywhere near their living quarters. Or, if they had been, he would have had a horrid time explaining to everyone why he just opened fire on his quartet. Roland simply stares into nothingness while Bert struggles to get back to his feet while Elaine is still on top of him. Elaine tries to reason with Roland. He tries to make him realize what just transpired, but Roland seems to be in an otherworldly daze. And then Bert finally speaks up. "You're out of your damned mind. Your brain has turned to grapefruit and grapefruit juice runs in your veins." And this is when Roland begins to speak, and he explains to them what he just experienced. Unfortunately, this doesn't bode well for him. A hallucinating gunslinger is no gunslinger at all. Elaine finally speaks and says, "Roland, if this keeps up, you're going to kill someone or force someone to kill you." Roland's face reeks of decay. His entire body reeks of it. His veins bulge out of his skin, as if spider silk infects his entire being. But for the first time in days, Roland agrees with his friends. This cannot be allowed to continue anymore, and so, while a tired and frankly overwhelmed Roland Deschain is enjoying a moment of peace in his chambers, he's interrupted by the voice of his father. Roland walks in with the saddlebag in hand while Bert and Elaine follow, and it takes only a second for Stephen to notice the plight of his son. He says, "Roland, obviously you have something on your mind. I, on the other hand, have many things on my mind, yet you don't see me looking like death warmed over. So whatever's festering within you, best to have it out before it devours you whole." Roland doesn't hold back. He confesses to his father, "My sins fester within me, Father. I have forgotten my duty to you. I have forgotten your face, because I did not deliver this to you immediately." Stephen Deschain is instantly mortified upon laying eyes on Marilyn's grapefruit, and the boys reassure him that only they know about it being here, and Stephen quickly dismisses them after they hand the grapefruit over. As his son leaves, Stephen says, "You have sinned, Roland." Yes, sin, I suspect, born from a more ill-fated curiosity than evil intent, which mitigates it somewhat. Expiate your sin thusly. When your mother joins us for the banquet, treat her with kindness. Forgive her as you would have me forgive you. Bert and Elaine breathe a sigh of relief, but Roland's hate for his mother transcends his own well-being. He would rather have been executed by his father than have to forgive his mother. And this is when Bert jokes that Roland manages to find the bright side of every dark event in their lives. Now that the boys have left, Stephen Deschain holds Marilyn's grapefruit in his hands and ponders over what he should do with it. Should he use it to hurt Farson, use his own power against him, or should he smash it to pieces and deprive Farson of the power that the sphere grants him? But then, the sphere begins to transform. It turns into an eye, just like it did with Roland. But Stephen is not Roland. He may be old, but he's still better than his son. He doesn't succumb to the sphere's temptations, and instead throws it into his safe and locks it away for good. But, like he said before, treachery is everywhere. And little does he know that Justice has been peering into his room through a slit in the door for quite some time now. Justice quickly rushes to the pigeon keep and writes a letter hastily that reads, "Deschain has the ball. Meet behind Palace, midnight, tomorrow." He then ties the letter to a pigeon and sends the bird on its way. As for where it goes, who knows? But we do know one thing for sure: Stephen was wrong to allow a spy like Justice amidst them, and when one operates at the level that Stephen does, one error could be all that's required to bring down a kingdom. Treachery, issue number 5. Infiltration. Marilyn's grapefruit has had a tremendous effect on Roland. Because though Elaine and Cuthbert are busy talking about what's to come, Roland isn't even in this room, only his body is. Elaine and Cuthbert, however, are too busy discussing the upcoming feast and the types of guns they'll be inheriting. The true guns of a gunslinger, not the clumsy barrel shooters that they're currently using. Elaine and Bert discuss the history of their respective firearms, about how Elaine will inherit his grandfather's guns and Bert will inherit his great-uncle's guns that date back to the time of Arthur Eld. As for Roland, he just stands there as if none of this matters, as if the world they're living in right now is only of the most passing interest to him. And then Roland finally speaks and says, "Enough. You prattle like children, like girls, like girl children. No more." Bert perks up and tells Roland that he sounds like a woman when he scolds them. Surely he's excited about tonight, the banquet, the guns they'll inherit. But all of this truly doesn't matter to Roland. What matters to him is the fact that he's sure that war has infiltrated the keep, their home. He knows that enemies surround them. Farson plots against them, treachery lurks within the walls of the keep, which is why the ceremonies or the origin of their guns doesn't matter to him anymore. All that matters is that his aim should be true, and that it surely is. Roland fires a shot at the buffalo skull and hits it between the eyes, but this is when Elaine brings up the topic of seating at the banquet, something he's desperately wanting to talk about. Bert tries to stop him, but Elaine ignores him and says, "Typically, new gunslingers are seated at the head table, next to the prospective bride selected by their father, and this makes Bert lose his mind. They're just 15. How can they be expected to fill in the shoes of a man they're supposed to become a few years down the line?" Elaine mocks him, and this prompts Bert to attack him by saying, "You wouldn't know what to do with a girl if you fell on her, Elaine. And, in fact, it's speculated your ignorance stems from the lack of interest." And now Bert has truly done it. Elaine tackles him while screaming, "You shut your mouth, I'm plenty interested." This forces Roland to step in and remind them that he already told them to stop. Both Elaine and Bert then scream and sink, "He started it," forcing Roland to respond with, "And now I'm finishing it." The two begrudgingly stop fighting, but Elaine is still angry, and he knows all the secrets. So he taunts Roland by telling him that he should indeed be concerned about the seating because he knows who will be seated beside him. Roland defiantly responds, "The ghost of Susan Delgado will be eternally at my side. I need no other company." And this brings the mood down, and Elaine simply tells Roland that his father has chosen Eileen to be seated beside him. Bert is outraged by this revelation. He curses and says this has Court's handprints all over it. According to Bert, Court is doing everything within his power to keep his niece safe by ensuring she's a part of the House of Eld. And this is when Roland turns to his friends with such ferociousness that they instantly fall silent. Roland wants his quartet to see things the way he sees them, and so he screams, "There's no safety in this world, not in our house or in any other. Eileen's made little secret of her interest in me over the years. Court would strike off his right hand before he bound her to someone she didn't love. That is his priority. just as my father's is to make a worthy match. This is when Bert and Elaine both implore him to move on. He can't keep living his life this way, but Roland defiantly says, "Am I to forget her? To treat her as I would a wound that scabs over and leaves naught but a faint white scar easily overlooked? My father's intentions, Eileen's feelings, none of that matters, Bert. Let it play out as it will. As for me, the only woman I would have ever married, that I will ever love, was reduced to cinders, tied to the Charyu tree. And in her death throes, when you or I would have been hurling profanities at the heavens, she cried out her love for me. To forget that would be to betray her. And I'll not betray one that I love and who loved me in return. Not only am I unable to move on, my friend, I have no desire to, ever." And that's the end of that conversation. Speaking of betraying loved ones, his friends may not know it, but Roland's mother is too on top of the list for him when it comes to that. Gabrielle Deschain, who is now standing in the middle of the woods, far away from the Great Hall, as the sun begins to set, stands motionless, almost like a dead body, when two men emerge from the darkness of the trees. One of them is Justice, while the other is a man named Kingson. Kingson greets Gabrielle with rhymes and poetry, and then hands her a knife coated in potent poison. He tells her that it's a gift from her beloved, Martin Broadcloak, and his uncle, the good man John Farson. He continues his poetry, but Gabrielle has grown tired of it. She tells him to stop, and this is when Justice takes over. He tells Gabrielle of the glass sphere hidden in Stephen's safe, and that she is to retrieve it. When John Farson comes to collect it in the future, her aid to him will be truly rewarded. Meanwhile, in the Great Hall, the riddle master, Abel Venet, is busy carefully crafting new riddles for the ceremony. Once done, he locks his riddles away in a safe for tonight, and this is when the reigning champion shows up to banter with Abel. Soon, however, they are joined by Kingson, who gloats a lot and calls Abel too old to be the riddle master. He and Court make a few snarky remarks before walking away, and as they do, they discuss Kingson and how neither of them trusts this new intruder that Stephen has just hired. Kingson has been hired as the court jester at the recommendation of Charles Champignon. Abel quickly brings to attention that no one has seen Charles in quite some time, and this makes Court suspicious, so he heads back towards the Great Hall under the pretext of something forgotten. Court may be a big man, but he can be light on his feet when it's needed, and so, when he slowly peeks into the chamber he was in not but a few moments ago, he finds Kingson slyly replacing Abel's riddles for the night with his own. Court exclaims, "Balls! Why would Charles recommend this little bastard?" And that, my friends, is something neither the narrator nor I take much pleasure in revealing. Just as Stephen suspected, Charles was unable to protect his family. Charles was taking his wife away from the action, so to speak, but on their journey, they were captured by Farson's men thanks to the intel from Justice. Unlike Susan, they broke Charles before murdering him, and they did that by assaulting his pregnant wife in front of him. Then they ripped the fetus from its mother's womb and murdered them both. By the time they slew Charles, he was Charles in name only. His mind was gone, and losing his mind was the only shred of mercy doled out that day. Back at the Great Hall, the ceremony is now underway, and after applauding Elaine and Cuthbert's bravery, Stephen Deschain declares that Roland has proved himself worthy. When he dies, Roland is to inherit the Guns of Eld, the Horn of Eld, and the title of Din. Stephen doesn't notice that upon the mention of his passing, Kingson smiles and then moves in closer to his wife and whispers something in her ear. Gabrielle turns a bit ashen upon hearing Kingson's words, and though Stephen doesn't notice this, Roland does. And this moment sears into his brain. Stephen then declares the feast open and asks the guests to enjoy the food, the riddles, and the music to huge applause. Now that the spotlight is no longer on him, Stephen moves closer to his wife and requests her to dance with him tonight. Gabrielle is overwhelmed by his generosity. She would love nothing more than to dance with him tonight, but first, she needs to compose herself. She's too flustered, and Stephen gently lets her go after having held her too close. In an empty hallway, Gabrielle lets her tears flow, and this is when Kingson shows up and reminds her that she's still to kill Stephen, even if her mind may have changed. Gabrielle says that she hasn't forgotten her task, and this is when Kingson says, "Then when you and your husband are together as man and wife, use it. Use the dagger with the knowledge that in the eyes of Martin and the good man you are loved, and theirs are the only eyes that matter." Treachery, issue number 6. Love. The celebrations in the Great Hall are underway. People dance, jest, cheer, and feast, and yet there's an unease in the atmosphere. Stephen Deschain notices this and decides to give a small speech. He reminds people that though trust may be what is lacking among them, they shouldn't let the possibility of treachery impede their festivities, because this is no way to live. If their enemies are to remain outside their gates, then they must keep them out of their minds and hearts as well. With that, Stephen glides towards his wife Gabrielle and asks her for a dance. She obliges, and the two of them glide across the floor like swans. When Gabrielle is intimately close to her husband, she asks if he can forgive her for betraying him, and Stephen says he's already done so. However, little does he know that his wife has just swiped the keys to his safe. The unease in the Great Hall is only amplified when you head to the stone table, where the young gunslingers are seated beside their prospective brides. Roland sits in dead silence, contemplating his father's words and actions. He then decides to dance with Eileen, for if a father can't count on his son to follow his example, who can he count on? Roland and Eileen dance, and the conversation between them unravels each of their sides. Roland learns that Eileen wants to be a gunslinger just like them. She wants to protect those that need protecting. In turn, Eileen learns about the bloody war of Hamry and how innocents lost their lives, which eventually leads to Roland telling her about Susan. He's blunt, not poetic like he usually is when talking about her. He simply says, her name was Susan. They burned her on a char-yew tree fire. Her last words were, "Roland, I love thee," screaming like a dying hawk. And in my own way, I died as well. Eileen doesn't know what to say. She simply apologizes for his pain, and Roland then asks her if she'd like to get some fresh air, and Eileen obliges. Once they're gone, Stephen Deschain starts the competition of riddles, and Abel Vinay calls in all those who wish to take part. Court and Kingston join, of course, but Court hasn't forgotten Kingston's treachery, and he plans to see how far Kingston is going to take this. On the roof, Eileen and Roland share a moment of peace. They start small. Eileen tells Roland about Cuthbert and how he doesn't know how to act around her, and Roland in turn tells her that Bert is simply intimidated by her beauty. Eileen then insists on talking to Roland about his pain and how she feels that time will eventually heal him, but Roland disagrees. He wants to undo Susan's death. He wants to undo Farson's birth. And there's only one place that can make that happen. A place that has power beyond his. Beyond Ken, beyond Ka. The Dark Tower is where he'll find his answers. Meanwhile, in the Great Hall, the riddle competition is underway, and Kingston is in the lead. Abel Vinay doesn't remember many of the riddles or the answers he's reading, but instead of finding it suspicious, he simply chalks it up to old age. Court is the only one standing in Kingston's way to victory, and then Vinay asks the last riddle. Not chest or box is now discussed. Money can be held in it, but just as we test its metal, within it there is rust. Kingston quickly replies that the answer is a treasure sack with the dust of old coins, and though neither Vinay nor Court think that's the right answer, the scroll says otherwise, which officially makes Kingston the new riddle master of Gilead. And while Kingston gloats and laughs, Court makes his move. He sneaks in behind Kingston and reveals that the true answer to that riddle is trust. He also reveals that the riddles they face today were copied from old texts and were substituted for Vinay's scrolls. Back on the roof, Eileen confronts Roland about the Dark Tower. She tells him it's a myth, but Roland tells her it's real and that it haunts his dreams, his visions. Whatever they are, one thing is for sure, Roland will make his way to the Dark Tower. He'll face whoever or whatever's in it, and he will force it to rid Midworld of the plague that rots it from the inside. Eileen declares that she'll be beside him for the entire journey, and Roland casually says she's joking, but this is when Eileen tells him she's dead serious, and then she kisses him. The first kiss is awkward, and when asked about it, Roland tells Eileen that he feels as though he's being unfaithful to Susan. Roland confesses that it sounds stupid to say it, but Eileen disagrees. She thinks it's quite noble, and so she kisses him again. This time, Roland doesn't feel awkward. He doesn't back away. But then, this tender moment is interrupted by the hellacious screams coming from within the castle. They race back downstairs, and as they rush through the corridors, Roland spots his mother, Gabrielle, sneaking away. If it hadn't been for Eileen's grip on him, he would have gone after her, but now he finds himself in the Great Hall, where Court is now standing over Kingston's dead body. Court jokes that he killed Kingston because he stole the title of the Riddle Master, but then he pulls out a signet ring from Kingston's pocket and reveals that he was working for Farson. Court then says, "Who knows how many spies like him have infiltrated our keep? The traitors must be weeded out immediately." lest the very battlements come crashing down upon our heads. And so, while the great hall is enveloped in the outcries of nobility, no one notices Roland rushing back into the living quarters to find his mother. When he passes his father's room, he finds it open, and when he peers inside, he sees that the safe has been emptied. His father would never empty the safe, which means that someone else opened it, and the only person who could have stolen the key from him was his mother during the dance. Roland races to her room, bangs on the door, and screams her name like a rabid animal, but when she doesn't open the door, he decides to kick it in. Inside, he spots the uncovered Marilyn's grapefruit lying on her bed, and Roland can't help but say, some small part of me was praying I was wrong about her. But there it is, the evidence of her treachery right in front of, you want to scream out, don't you? You want to scream and save Roland from the grapefruit because surely he should have learned his lesson by now. But sadly, he hasn't. And before he knows it, he's in the grasp of the grapefruit once again. In it, he sees Rhea of the Coos slowly approaching him from behind, a garrote ready to strangle and decapitate him, just like his father. And so, Roland turns around, screams the Gunslinger oath, and fires 3 fatal shots at Rhea. However, Roland is unable to complete his oath because when it's time to say, "Lest I forget the face of my father," he instead says mother, because it's his mother who stands bleeding and dying in front of him. In her hands is the beautiful belt she made for him in Debaria during her exile, the belt that has Roland's name meticulously stitched into it, the gift she was going to leave him. His mother coughs, chokes on her blood, and before she dies, she says, "Roland, I love thee." She then falls to her knees and leaves Roland forever. Fall of Gilead, issue number 1. And so it begins. Gunslingers don't faint. They just don't. They sometimes might allow themselves to be yanked into unconsciousness if you fill them with enough bullet holes, but that's about it. Yet, here's Roland, lying unconscious on the floor in front of his mother's body. In his defense, Roland is young and inexperienced. In addition, he was just tricked by the grapefruit and ended up gunning down his own mother, so there's that. We can pardon his weakness, but as for Gabrielle Deschain, she's never waking up again. At least not in this world. Gabrielle's spirit now leaves her body, and in this moment, she caresses her son and says, "Oh, Roland, my sweet boy, look what I have brought down upon us. Everything is so clear to me now as it never was in life." Gabrielle goes on to say that none of this was his fault, that they both were betrayed, and though her pain has finally come to an end, her son's is just beginning. If she could, Gabrielle would do anything to spare Roland the heartache that's about to come, but she has nothing left to give but forgiveness. And so she forgives Roland and says, "Forgive us both, my son. We knew not what we did." And this wakes Roland up, and the first thing he does is look for his mother. As Roland slowly comes back to consciousness, he's forced to piece together the events of what just happened. The search for the grapefruit, his pursuit of his mother, him getting trapped by the grapefruit again, and how it tricked him into shooting his own mom. Roland then remembers the belt in his mother's hand and instantly reaches out for it, this gift from her, and then he rushes to his mother's body and tries to stop the bleeding. But Roland knows he's too late. The body is already starting to grow cold. It's too late, and Roland lets out a painful cry as he struggles to accept that his mother, whom he hated so much, is dead by his own hands. Meanwhile, Eileen, Cuthbert, and Elaine have carried Kingston's body to the morgue. They banter for a bit, and Elaine asks Eileen about what happened between her and Roland on the roof. Eileen sighs and tells them that they just talked about Susan a lot, and this is when Bert snarkily says, "Oh, come now, Eileen, your charms can't outstrip even a dead girl's," and Elaine instantly smacks him on the head. He calls Bert Ka-mai, which means cause fool. Elaine too calls Bert a fool, and then tells them that yes, Roland isn't interested in her. In fact, he's more interested in his own mother, whom he hates so much. That must be why he ran after her as soon as he got the chance. Elaine and Bert, however, know Roland better. He must have been sure that Gabrielle was up to something. That's why he went after her, and so they lock the morgue and decide to go after him. Stephen Deschain, Court, and Abel Vinay, along with the soldiers, are busy searching Kingston's room when they spot a pigeon entering. They catch the bird and find a message intended for Kingston tied to its foot. It reads, "Will collect grapefruit at midnight," and with this, Stephen instantly knows what this is about. He checks his pockets for his safe's key, only to realize the keys are gone, and the only person who was close enough to him to steal it was his wife, Gabrielle. Court suspects the same, but Stephen doesn't blame his wife out loud until he's gathered more evidence. One thing is for sure, Gilead is in danger. Either an enemy agent will try to gain entrance to the castle, or an operative within will try to rendezvous for the grapefruit. And so the castle is put on high alert. men secretly patrol the walls, guards are posted at every entrance, and every man, woman, and child entering or exiting the castle is forced to report to Stephen regardless of their standing or rank. He orders everyone to stay alert, to suspect even their own families, and then leaves to check his room while ordering Court and Vinay to keep searching Kingston's room. Court begins to toss around papers, hastily searching through the man's sheets, and this is when Vinay tries to get to the bottom of what's troubling him. Court blames himself for killing Kingston, or if they had captured him instead, he could have been questioned and they wouldn't be forced to search through his belongings. Court then stabs Kingston's pillow and splits it in half, and this is more than enough to tell Vinay that there is more. We learn that they both suspect they were betrayed by Gabrielle, someone they've known since she was a child. Vinay takes this opportunity to remind Court that Martin's sorcery is at work here. He had Gabrielle under his spell before, he likely had her under his spell now. Court understands, but also needs time to process, and so he requests Vinay leave him alone for a while, and his old friend obliges. Stephen, meanwhile, enters his room to find the safe empty, and when he looks around, he finds Gabrielle's broken bracelet on the floor, one that he had given her years ago. And so, now that he has proof, the Din of Gilead has no choice but to issue a warrant for her. Court is busy losing hope while resting on Kingston's bed, and suddenly he spots a loose floorboard under his feet. When pried open, Court finds Kingston's hidden stash of incriminating documents and paraphernalia, including what seems to be his journal. Court removes the cloth from the journal and begins to read, only to realize that it contains all the information about Farson they'll ever need. Court eagerly licks his fingers and flips through the pages, finding names and maps. Unfortunately, what Court doesn't realize is that the cloth wasn't on the book to just protect it from dust. This is when Vinay thinks that he's given Court enough time and returns to the room to watch his friend actively poisoning himself. He screams for Court to stop, but unfortunately it's too late. Court doesn't respond to Vinay, and he realizes that his friend has succumbed to the ways of sorcery that Vinay had been warning him about not moments ago. The book is magic. It contains nothing of importance, its page is blank, and it's been enchanted to show the reader what their heart desires the most while slowly poisoning them in the process. Meanwhile, Stephen heads for his wife's chambers to confront her. When she doesn't respond, nor does she open the door, he unlocks it himself, only to be face to face with Roland, who's smeared in blood and tears over his mother's dead body. Stephen screams, "God in heaven! Roland, do you know who did this? If so, speak the walking dead man's name so that I may visit his final fate upon him." Fall of Gilead. Issue number 2, The Hour of Many. The room is now filled with people, Gabrielle's body is covered, and Roland's friends, along with Eileen, stand in the doorway, too shocked to say anything. If Roland wanted, he could lie to his father in this moment, say that he found his mother's body this way, that the blood on his hands is simply from trying to save her, but Roland isn't that kind of a man. And so, after a short pause that feels like an eternity, Roland finally speaks and confesses to his crime. He makes sure that his father knows that this was Martin and Farson's doing through the grapefruit, but he was the one who pulled the trigger regardless. Stephen is now faced with the idea that he's going to lose not one, but 2 family members, and so suddenly, and though he tries to compose himself, he begins to seep through the cracks. Stephen says that Roland's confession plays to his advantage, and so does the safe key that he's found on Gabrielle's table, but then he begins to choke and stammer, and no one in the room knows what one's supposed to do when the Din of Gilead begins to crack. Roland's friends stare mournfully. They've never felt so helpless. Stephen then composes himself and asks his quartet, Robert Allgood and Christopher Johns, to take care of Gabrielle's body with dignity. No matter her crimes, she's still his queen. But as the 2 men pick up her body, a knife slips out of her sleeve. Robert tries to fight for her by proposing that it may have been for protection, but Stephen is no longer hiding from the truth. With a voice as dead as his wife, Stephen picks up the knife and says, "A knife with Farson's sigil emblazoned upon it. It would seem what she intended to protect was the good man's interests, probably by slipping this between my ribs." He then turns to Roland and says that this is his final gift to him from his mother from beyond the grave. This proves that Farson and Martin were involved in manipulating them. First, they ripped Gabrielle away from them, and now they were trying to turn Stephen and Roland against each other. His father implores Roland to fight it and await justice, and then orders his guards to arrest Roland. Eileen moves towards Roland, but Bert grabs her gently and whispers in her ear, "I know you want to cry out to him, Eileen, I know you want to run to him. If you fancy yourself you have the heart of a gunslinger, then exercise the control of a gunslinger. Help him when you can, but this is not that time. Suddenly, a guard bursts into the room and frantically informs Stephen that a raven was spotted leaving the castle hauling a velvet sack. The North Tower guard tried to shoot it down, but was struck down by a bolt of lightning. While they tried to resuscitate the man, 3 men were spotted racing out of the castle on horseback. 2 of them matched the description of Martin and Kingson, and Cuthbert is rattled by this revelation. Kingson is supposed to be dead and in the morgue, but the man informs him that they checked the morgue and his body is no longer there. Robert reminds his son that he needs to stay calm in such situations because not all of the world has been revealed to him or them yet. Martin can reanimate corpses, though what comes back is never the same man, but a demon in disguise. Elaine then points them to another piece of evidence, a raven feather in Gabrielle's window. This means one thing's for sure, the men couldn't be far, which means they can be pursued. And so, Stephen departs with Robert and Chris to chase down Martin, or whoever they can find, while in Court's cottage, he continues to vomit while Vinay chides him over and over again. Dr. DeCurry is here to treat him, but one look at Court tells him there's not much he can do. However, Court is still elated. He's overjoyed by the fact that they found Kingston's journal and Farson's plans, which means his death won't be in vain. Vinay checks the book and sighs because its pages are blank. He knows it's been ensorcelled to show what one desires the most, and this is when DeCurry reveals that he suspects the book was laced with dragon blood. This is when the nurse informs DeCurry that Court has passed out, and this is when he tells Vinay that there's not much that can be done for Court apart from administering some morphine in case he wakes up. Vinay curses Martin and then asks DeCurry about his son. His son and his quartet are set to graduate next week, and so he advises DeCurry that they should come and see their teacher, to pay their last respects, and to see what their enemy is capable of doing to even the strongest of them. In Vinay's opinion, such a lesson will save their lives down the road, and he knows that Court would approve of this. And then, an unexpected surprise. Shimi shows up at the north gate of Gilead. He's stopped by the guards, who assume that he's a simpleton, but now, when Shimi speaks, we learn that he's aware of the 2 personalities within him. He tells the guards, "We have Shimi." Well, wait, Shimi has Shimi, I think. No, Shimi thinks. So much thinking. Still not used to it. Shimi, it comes and goes. There's so much rattling around in my head, I'm not sure who I am or how I'm supposed to be anymore. The guards, naturally tired by this rant, ask Shimi bluntly what he wants, and he tells them that he's here to meet Roland, Elaine, and Cuthbert. He then tells them bluntly that they're standing in his way, and this is when one of them begins to laugh and mock him. Shimi's voice then changes, his eyes begin to glow, and then the very next instant he vanishes right in front of the guards. The one mocking him begins to scream and sound the alarm because, according to him, a Not Man has invaded the castle. His partner tries to tell him that Not Men are old stories for children, but he isn't convinced and issues an alert. The other guards reluctantly start a patrol for a simpleton boy and his mule, many of them not convinced by the report. Shimi, meanwhile, hides in a dark corner with his mule while soothing it so it stays quiet. Bert and Elaine, meanwhile, extort the guard in the jail to pay Roland an unsanctioned visit. Roland has lost all hope. He holds their hands and tells them that they shouldn't be here, else others would start suspecting them of treachery, but Bert tells Roland that further evidence of Martin and Farson's machinations has been found. There's no doubt that Roland was tricked into shooting his mother, but that doesn't matter to Roland because he was the one who pulled the trigger. He killed his mom. He should have listened to them. He should have never messed with the grapefruit, yet he did. His negligence, his hubris is criminal, and so when he hangs, he thinks he'll deserve it. Elaine tries to knock some sense into him, but Roland is being too difficult. He asks his friends to be his executioners when the time comes. He asks Bert to be the one who ties the knot, and this finally makes Bert lose his cool. He tells Roland that he won't be hanged, they'll make sure of it. And if by some mistake he is indeed found guilty, then the 2 of them will break him out and become fugitives by his side. He then tells Roland about the evidence they found and how their fathers are hot on Martin's heels at this very moment. When they find him, they'll beat a confession out of Martin, which will exonerate Roland. But Martin once again seems to have eluded Stephen, Robert, and Chris. His tracks seemingly stop at a cliff face. Stephen investigates the area and soon finds a door. This is a fallen city, overgrown in the midst of a forest. Chris warns them that this is likely the home of slow mutants, which means they should get out of there. This is likely a trap of Martin's doing, but as the three gunslingers race away, a slow mutant pops out of cover and fires a blow dart. The dart hits Steven's horse, which sends him crashing into Chris and his horse. They both fall to the ground, and Robert fires at the slow mutants approaching them. Chris joins in, and they both pull Steven to safety, despite him ordering them to abandon him numerous times. And so, the three gunslingers hold their ground, and slowly, the slow mutants fall. Slow mutants are used to ambushing prey, outnumbering them, and they aren't used to prey that fights back, especially prey as skilled as a gunslinger. Soon, they've killed every last one of them, except for the one that hides behind a rock cowering. Unfortunately, all it takes is one slow mutant to tip the scales, because when this one pops out of cover and shoots his dart, he aims straight for Steven. Robert jumps in to save Steven's life and shoots off the mutant's head, but the damage is done. The dart has hit Robert instead, and he passes away almost instantly. A grief-stricken Chris keeps pounding on his chest again and again in hopes of reviving him, but between the loud thumps, you swear you can hear the cawing of a raven in the distance. Fall of Gilead, issue number 3. Farewell. And so, as Court lies on his bed dying, Vinay by his side, his apprentice gunslingers, along with Elaine and Cuthbert, show up to pay their respects. Vinay wakes up to Court to talk with them, and in typical Court fashion, he doesn't hold back his words. Court asks about Roland, and Vinay tells him that the young gunslinger has been detained. Court knows that Vinay is lying to him. His body may have betrayed him, but his ears haven't. Whenever Court wakes up, he can hear the nurses talking in hushed tones. They speak of Roland in jail, call him a traitor, and they say that he should be hanged. Vinay vehemently denies these allegations. There's no way Roland will be hung for his crimes, and this is when Court lashes out and says, "Why should I believe an established liar? I pray you're right, but if not, I will meet him in the clearing and speak for him in the hall of judgment, thus justifying my death's timing. And I will say that if my greatest student was strung up like a common thief, then damn Gilead to a fate it richly deserves." Court then summons his apprentices. After all, there's no point in wasting time. The apprentices slowly inch into the room while asking the nurse if Court is eventually going to recover, and that's when Court coughs and vomits enough blood to send shivers down their spines. They no longer have any questions about Court. The blood is enough to tell them that their teacher only has a few minutes left. The youngins inch forward and tell Court that they're sorry, but as their teacher, he still scolds them for blubbering like infants. Upon hearing the story, Court almost leaps out of his bed and looks the youngins straight in their eyes. He then says, "To hell with your sorry. I don't care about your sorries, nor do your enemies or your fathers. Remember that, and remember the face of your fathers. My life's race is run, but yours and theirs will depend upon the lessons I have taught you all." We then switch back to Steven, who stares at Robert's infected dead body and kicks the dust. This was a waste of life. Robert shouldn't have died like this, but this is when Chris corrects him. Robert died saving Steven's life, and in his opinion, it was the worthiest death of all. Chris asks if they should bury Robert here, but Steven angrily tells him that they'll fashion a stretcher and carry him back to Gilead. He won't have the slow mutants digging his remains up and desecrating his corpse. And this is when Chris questions Steven about the slow mutants. How could these animals know how to use darts? Steven instantly knows that this was Martin's doing. Animals can't make darts, but they can be taught how to use them. We then switch back to Gilead, where Eileen has just entered Court's room. She's wearing a dress, and Court jokes that now he's seen it all. It must mean that his end is near. Eileen is inconsolable, though. She races to her uncle and naively screams that if he dies, then there will be no one left to teach her the ways of a gunslinger. Court reassuringly hugs her and says, "Finally, someone with her priorities in order. You have already learned so much, Lady Oriza. Slayer of the Harrier Greydick would have nothing on you. The darkness falls upon me, and yet I see things so much more clearly. Damn the old ways. You and every woman with a fighting heart deserves to be a gunslinger." Eileen offers to give up her dream, but Court instantly grabs her before she can finish her sentence. He looks her straight in the eyes and says, "Don't you dare complete that sentence. Don't ever let anyone, even you yourself, make you less than you are." He then explains to Eileen and the rest of the room that as long as they remember his lessons, he will never die. He will live on in them. And so, when they find the bastard who killed him and shoot him in the head, it will be Court pulling the trigger. Then, the old teacher begins to convulse. Eileen cries out his name. First she begs him to hold on, then she pleads with him, and then she even orders him not to die. But Court is his own man, and as always, he does what he believes to be right. And at that moment, not wanting to prolong the heartache of his loved ones, he knows it's right that he should die. and so he does. Bert tries to console Eileen. He tries to take her away, to clean the blood off of her, but Eileen shoves him away because he wants to make her pretty all over again, force her into the box, force her to be a pretty girl. Bert tries to explain that that's not what he meant, and she finally realizes that she's being a little hysterical. As Vinay places coins on his dead friend's eyes, Bert and Elaine lead Eileen away. They wipe the blood off her and tell her that she doesn't need to be sorry. They understand what she must be going through with Roland in jail and now Court dead. Bert tries to reassure her by saying that Roland will be freed and Court will be avenged, and when all is said and done, she can marry Roland and birth many strong gunslingers. But this hits Eileen the wrong way, and she screams, "Are you deaf? Court said I'm as good as any of you, as deserving as... Oh, I don't know why I even bother talking to you." She then storms off, and Bert is left wondering what crime he committed. Shimi, meanwhile, is still hiding in the green pastures of Gilead. He feeds his mule, Cap, the grass that grows in the castle, while planning to go out at night to look for Roland and his quartet. Meanwhile, Eileen, fed up of being judged by the others, decides it's time for drastic measures. There was only one man in this world who understood her, and now he's gone too. Crying about his death or her state wasn't going to help, and the fact was that even the best of men in this world were going to think just like Cuthbert, and so she ditches the dress, wraps her torso up in bandages, and then begins to cut her hair. The world judges her by her hair, her body, her clothes, and so she would change all of that. Now that she was transformed, she looked just like a boy. Eileen looks at herself in the mirror and says, "So let them judge me solely by the cunning of my mind, the strength of my spirit, and the accuracy of my eye and hand. And let that be my legacy." Bert and Elaine, meanwhile, stroll into the green pastures to get away from all that's going on in the castle. They discuss what will happen to Eileen now that Court is dead. She has no family, and Elaine tells Bert that, as Din, Stephen will now become Eileen's guardian. This makes Bert ask an important question. If Stephen becomes her guardian, wouldn't that make Roland and Eileen siblings? Surely she couldn't marry Roland then. Elaine finds this thought disgusting, and this is when Bert suggests that he could marry Eileen if Roland couldn't, just to keep her safe. Elaine tells him that if that happens, she'd kill him, or herself, or both, but only time will tell. He then points out to Bert that there's a murder of crows perched on the trees in front of them. This is quite odd because in Midworld, when a murder of crows appears, they bring war on their wings. And that's exactly when they hear someone screaming, and instantly Elaine knows that it's Shimi and that he's being attacked by something. They rush to his aid and find him being picked up by one slow mutant while a second is trying to lead Cap away. Bert and Elaine shoot both slow mutants in the head and save Shimi's life, and upon seeing the two of them, Shimi jumps into Bert's arms. Then, while Shimi calms down Cap, Bert and Elaine ask the pertinent question: what are slow mutants doing in Gilead? Sure, they got here through the sewers, but why come here? Bert then tells Elaine to focus on Shimi, and the two of them lead him away for some much-needed food. In the kitchens, Shimi scarfs down food like a rabid animal, and when the maid laughs and asks him to slow down, Shimi casually reveals that he has always had to fight for his food from the dogs. Stephen and Chris then enter the kitchen and lead Bert away, who doesn't suspect a thing. Elaine, however, instantly knows what's going on, even without his touch. Seeing Stephen and Chris without Robert should be enough to tell anyone that the third gunslinger of their quartet has fallen. Maybe Bert didn't suspect a thing because for his father to fall was unfathomable to him. But when he lays his eyes on Robert's dead body, he doesn't care for his father's guns that are being handed to him. And as he holds his dead father's hand, he finally realizes what Eileen meant when she offered to give up on her dreams in exchange for Court's life, for he too would give up on his father's guns, his guns, if it would bring back Robert. Then, that night, while Vinay is busy carefully preparing Court's body for burial, there's a knock on his door. It's one of the castle guards who tells Vinay that he has a message for him. Vinay jokes that if it's bad news, he'll try not to kill the messenger. However, this is when the guard pulls out a gun and shoots Vinay in the dead of night. Fall of Gilead, issue number 4, Horn of Eld. Stephen Deschain and the rest of the gunslingers have gathered in the Great Hall to discuss their next move. So many deaths in such quick succession has led Stephen to believe that Farson plans to attack them soon. Gabrielle's death, despite her crimes, was a tragic blow to Gilead. Roland killing her was even worse, and all of this transpired because of Marilyn's grapefruit. It all started with the grapefruit, and it has come so far that they now have a casualty amongst the gunslingers. Robert's death to save Stephen's unworthy life was in vain, according to him. He was struck down by slow mutants who are now under Farson's control and now wander with impunity in New Canaan. This is when a drunk Justice interrupts Stephen and gloats that he's going to be their key to victory. He gloats that he'll help the Gunslingers destroy Farson's camp and reveals that the camp is undermanned. Reinforcements are at least a few days away, which is why, if they wanted, they could capture Farson, kill Martin, and retrieve the grapefruit all in one night. And this is when another guard joins the conversation. His name is Liam, and Liam tries to politely tell Stephen that more trouble is brewing in Gilead. Stephen asks him to speak plainly, and Liam sighs and tells him that instigators have been rallying up the common folk of Gilead. Gabrielle was beloved among the common folk of Gilead because of her generosity. Because her crimes haven't yet been disclosed, the public thinks that her violent end was unjust and whoever's behind the murder should be hung. Then come in the instigators, likely employed by Farson, who are busy spreading rumors that Roland won't be punished and that the Gunslingers will protect him. This has been going on for a few days now, and now the entire public is convinced that the Gunslingers are corrupt and that they should be overthrown. They plan to form a lynch mob and punish Roland themselves. Stephen sighs because if they reveal Gabrielle's crimes now, the public won't believe them, and this is when Chris offers a solution. They should hold a fully open trial for Roland with a jury selected from the public. But Stephen doesn't want to risk it. Most of the public is going to be biased, and this is when a drunk Justice intervenes and rudely tells them that the only way to save Roland's life is by putting an end to Farson and Martin. Stephen has no choice but to agree, and he orders his Gunslingers to attack Farson's camp that night. Meanwhile, in jail, Roland is visited by Eileen, who helps free him. He doesn't recognize her at first, but when he does, he doesn't question her about her new look. She won't let Roland lose his chance to pay his final respects to court. Speaking of crimes, Laird de Curry is in his office treating a child when 3 guards come in to summon him. Their tone and demeanor warn de Curry that something is afoot, and so, under the pretext of grabbing his things, de Curry reaches for his gun. Unfortunately, the men spot him doing so, and they instantly fire, killing every man, woman, and child in the room. Stephen and the Gunslingers, meanwhile, are on top of the hill that guards Farson's camp. Justice is goading Stephen to directly attack the camp, but Stephen knows better. He decides to see the camp for himself, and this is when he realizes that Justice has lied to them. The camp isn't undermanned. It's full of Farson's armies, as well as a battalion of slow mutants. Stephen turns around and curses Justice, only to find himself and the Gunslingers surrounded by Farson's men. Stephen doesn't ask any more questions. He begins shooting, because the fact that he hasn't been murdered yet means that Farson wants him alive. So he wants to kill as many men as he can before he's captured. Justice tries to reason with Stephen, but Stephen hits him in the face with his gun, breaks his jaw, and then holds him hostage. Justice orders his men to stand down, and they do so, but only for a moment. They shoot and kill Justice, and thus begins the final battle as the rest of the Gunslingers and Stephen charge into Farson's camp. Back in Gilead, Eileen and Roland discover Vinay's dead body on top of Court's, both friends now lost to time. Roland now understands the game's afoot. Court's death was just an opening salvo for Farson's spies. Eileen thinks they need to find whoever did this. They might already be fleeing the city, but this is when Roland explains to her that they aren't facing a lone wolf here, they're facing a ravenous pack. And then, Roland hears a faint sound carried by the wind. Eileen hears it too, and Roland instantly knows that this is the sound of his father's horn, the horn of Eld. Roland's right. Stephen blows the horn as gunslingers all around him succumb to their death. And this is when Roland says, "I was wrong, Eileen. This isn't just the beginning, it's the beginning of the end." Fall of Gilead, issue number 5, Men of Legend. Men of Legend are double-edged swords. They're the ones who inspire the rest of us with tales of their smarts and great deeds. We're told to remember not just their faces, but the whole of their greatness, and to let that greatness inform our own actions. Such was the case with Arthur Eld, the greatest man to ever live. As accomplished as Stephen Deschain is, he's merely the protector of what Arthur truly built. Gilead didn't exist as such until Arthur Eld practically willed it into existence brick by brick. And he was a man who knew that for everything that's built, there's them what desire to tear it down. And so, when Arthur was building Gilead, he built it armed with numerous traps. Traps in the floor, in the sewers, and even in the arches. Stephen Deschain, however, can't ponder about Arthur's immortality right now. Only death is on his mind because all of his fellow gunslingers were slain in the ambush last night. Chris carries an injured Stephen on a horse as they return to Gilead. The guards quickly rush to aid them, and Stephen tells them that everyone was slain and that the two of them are the only survivors of the ambush. He then quickly steadies himself and says in a stern voice, "There's no time for questions, only instant obedience. Lower the portcullis, move all women and children to the inner keep, and inform every man, hell, every boy with even a wisp of hair on his cheek, that Farson is nigh, and enemies within must be rooted out. Well, don't just stand there looking ashen, go!" Stephen then takes a moment to catch his breath and orders Chris to fetch Roland. He doesn't care about the law or the public anymore. However, Chris tells him to look up because Roland and Eileen are standing in front of them. Roland hugs his father, and Stephen takes this time to whisper the following in his son's ear. "The bastards are coming for us, Roland, and the only ones I can absolutely trust are here before me." Chris then decides to fetch Dr. DeCurry so that he can fix Stephen's arm. Stephen decides to plan what to do next in his chambers and orders Chris to come to him an hour later, which should give DeCurry enough time to set his arm. Christopher Jones is too worried about the past and future, too worried about what Stephen did wrong and what Arthur Eld would have done in this moment, to notice the three guards eyeing him as he enters the infirmary. Inside, Christopher finds the massacre, the dead bodies of DeCurry and his nurses, and this is when the three guards ambush him from behind. Two of them grab him, and the third one holds his mouth shut and slices Christopher's throat. Stephen sips some wine to ease his pain, and then reaches for the original schematic of Gilead that Arthur Eld left his descendants. As he does so, Stephen prays to Arthur and says, "On my watch, the enemy brought us to this pass. On my head are the souls that have been lost, and now I turn to you, O my greatest ancestor, for you were a far wiser, insightful man than I could ever hope to be. Let me review your original plans for this city and reacquaint myself with the safeguards you built in for a time when a poor, pathetic fool such as myself allowed doom to storm our very gates." Stephen goes over the plans, and while engrossed in them, he fails to notice a guard who enters his chambers quietly. By the time Stephen notices his presence, he thinks it's Roland who's come to his chambers as instructed, but this is when the guard grabs Stephen and stabs him through the chest while screaming, "I am not Roland, but have a preview of the mewling puke's fate. A pity that a man who could foresee anything did not bother to pass that trait on to his heirs. Long live John Farson." The man then notices the schematic of Gilead on the table and is naturally overjoyed. Farson would reward him well for this, and so, while he's busy counting his eggs that are yet to hatch, Stephen grabs the bottle on the table and breaks it on the guard's face. He then lunges at the man, which knocks the gun out of his hand. Stephen tries to push the guard out of the window, but the man fights back and punches Stephen in the face. He shoves his thumb into Stephen's wound, which causes him to stumble back. However, he grabs the fallen gun and shoots the man's head clean off. The guard's body flies out of the window and sinks into the moat below, and as the headless body winds up at the bottom of the moat, Stephen uses his own blood to scrawl a final message for his son. Elaine, Cuthbert, Roland, and Eileen now stumble upon the massacre in the infirmary and realize that Elaine's father has been killed as well. His blood is fresher, which means that he was killed because he found out what happened to DeCurry. Eileen is naturally rattled by all these events, the will to be a gunslinger slowly fading within her, but Bert tells her to hold her ground. The only thing to do now is to fight back and to try not to bleed. This is when Roland remembers his father and instantly races towards his chambers so fast that the world seems to turn into a blur around him. Eileen races after him, warning him that if a trap was indeed laid out for Stephen, then racing into it wasn't a good idea, but Roland is too fast to heed her words, and when he opens the door to his father's chambers, his worst fears come true. There, in front of him, lies his dead father, and he and his quartet are once again one in mourning. Eileen points to the schematic near his father's body, and on the back of it are the words, "Open the pits," scrawled in Stephen's own blood. Eileen asks Roland what this means, and a heartbroken, nearly dead Roland coldly tells her, "This means my father knew his death was nigh, and he had no desire for us to join him. The pits are Gilead's ancient source of defense, diabolical instruments of slaughter to be used only in the most dire of circumstances." His father's body still cooling in his chambers, Roland now looks upon the young gunslingers gathered in the council room. He tells them about the traps, and a young Randolph is mortified upon learning that they're real. His mother would always scare him about them to stop him from wandering around the keep. Roland doesn't dwell on such issues, however. He quickly starts issuing orders. He assigns Cuthbert to be the operator of the traps, and Elaine will be Bert's lookout. Elaine will give the signal at precise moments to execute the traps. As for the rest of them, they will be Elaine's eyes and ears on the ground, signaling the directions from which the attacks are coming so Elaine can convey the cues to Bert. And this is when Eileen calmly approaches Roland and says, "Roland, no one can dispute the tragedy surrounding this moment, but I think we can all agree that your father would have wanted you to have these." She then hands him his father's sandalwood guns. Bert finds the moment fitting, and so he hands over Arthur Eld's horn to Roland as well, as he is the true heir to it now. All the apprentices then come together, and in unison they say, "Long live Roland, Din of Gilead." They congratulate him in an understandably muted manner, and while everyone is busy admiring the guns and the horn, Roland quietly slips out onto the balcony. Bert spots him and follows. He asks Roland if he thinks the pits will work, and what will they do if they don't. Roland sighs and tells his friend, "If it doesn't work, then we die. But I swear if I do, it will be with my teeth buried in the throat of John Farson." Fall of Gilead, issue number 6, War. Roland, Eileen, and the other gunslingers stand atop the outer wall of Gilead and keep a close eye on the horizon. Thomas says maybe it won't be so bad, and Eileen agrees. As to why she agrees is anybody's guess. Perhaps she does believe it won't be so bad, or maybe she wants to really believe it badly, or maybe she's simply telling Thomas what he wants to hear. Perhaps she's simply done being scared. Either way, she has to know that Roland is standing right there and he can hear every word they speak. They watch the horizon, and soon Farson's armies come pouring over it like ants. The army is massive. Hundreds and thousands of slow mutants alongside Farson's trusted warriors, and they mount an assault so large that any form of hope the warriors of Gilead had is instantly lost. But 3 days ago, that wasn't the case, as our young gunslingers prepared for the coming battle. At one point, while surveying and assessing Gilead's traps, Roland even said, "I think we may actually be able to come through this unscathed." Of course, the others had a hard time believing him, but who can fault him for trying to instill some hope in his men? Jamie and Thomas are beside him, and they are currently inspecting the trap that shoots spears out of the ground. On top of the outer wall beside them is Eileen, who's preparing the necessary signals and fake guards for their walls. She asks Jamie if he can tell which one of the guards is fake, and Jamie picks the left one. Eileen smirks and says the job is going fine because in actuality, both guards are fakes. Meanwhile, Bert is busy teaching a young kid how to fire a gun, and this is when we learn that the young gunslinger has recruited every man, woman, and child that can hold a gun for their war. As long as the person can handle the recoil, they're allowed to join the fight, and as for the rest, they are led to the Inner Keep Sanctuary, where they will have access to the sewers should they need to abandon the city. Roland, Jamie, and Thomas then measure the trap's length and nail a red flag to the ground so that Eileen can clearly see the boundary of it. Eileen uses the flag to test her signal to Elaine, and he responds by shining a mirror right back at her. Bert then heads down into the tower to check on Bert, who will be handling the controls for the trap, and this is when Bert reveals that this machinery hasn't been maintained for at least 100 years, everything is covered in rust, and most likely all of it is jammed. We then switch back to the present, 3 days later, as the armies of Farson reach Gilead. The slow mutants are puzzled by the red cloth marker placed by the gunslingers, while Eileen frantically waves her red flags over and over again to signal Elaine. Elaine screams for Bert to activate the traps, but Bert is simply unable to move the stuck lever. This is when Farson's tank fires at the tower and destroys its top. Elaine barely manages to stay alive, but coincidentally, the explosion helps loosen the lever enough for Bert to pull it. He jokes, "Good thinking getting them to shoot at you." Like the gates of hell, the ground beneath Farson's armies opens up, and in an instant, his entire front line is decimated, along with a couple of his tanks. Farson is mildly impressed, but Martin and his right hand, General Grissom, quickly spoil his mood by stating the obvious. Farson says, "It appears my closest advisors have chosen to spend the battle informing me of the patently obvious." Farson then says that he doesn't care about the mutants, they're cannon fodder, and this is their purpose: to fall in the front lines, to take the brunt of the attack, to reveal what traps the gunslingers have laid out for them. He then points to the battlefield and says, "Once a trap is sprung, it cannot be reused. See, even now the piles of dead mutants simply serve as a bridge for the next wave to cross upon." Eileen springs all the other traps to slow down Farson's forces, but Gilead is clearly outnumbered. It doesn't take long for Farson's forces to reach its outer wall. They use grappling hooks and siege towers to scale the walls, while the gunslingers do their best to hold them back. A battle, a real battle, isn't one big fight, it's many smaller ones, so now that the gunslingers have lost control of the outer walls, they retreat to the inner keep and the city's portcullis drops between the enemy and its fleeing citizens. We flash back to 3 days ago and find Roland, Jamie, and Thomas surveying the inner keep's traps, the garden walls that are fitted with huge blades, and a greenhouse full of spiders. So, when Farson's forces, now without their cannon fodder, try to scale these walls, they're cut into pieces. And then, as his horrified men recover, the gunslingers throw thousands of spiders on them. This is when Roland screams out and challenges Farson to show himself. Annoyed, Farson turns to Grissom and says, "The young Din seems to have a tendency to shoot off his mouth. Grissom, shoot off his mouth for him. And, while you're at it, shoot him off the walls, along with the rest of his damned gunslingers, and take the walls with them." At Farson's orders, bazookas are aimed at the inner walls, and in an instant, they're destroyed. The air is thick with smoke and debris, and the stench of death is everywhere. Meanwhile, the traitors who killed Elaine's father, now armed with a flamethrower, enter the inner sanctuary and lay waste to everyone inside. Farson has won the battle, and so he orders his men to take prisoners, then remind them that Farson doesn't take prisoners and kill them. Martin, meanwhile, decides to relieve Gilead of its flag. The remaining gunslingers, meanwhile, make their way to the inner sanctuary, only to be faced with the traitorous guards who first mock them and try to burn them alive using the flamethrower. However, when they pull the trigger, nothing happens. They've run out of fuel. Before they can concoct another deceitful lie, the gunslingers gun them down. But when Roland and the others continue walking, they soon realize what the men were doing here. The bodies of every woman, child, and old person that was hiding in the keep now lay charred and sizzling in front of them. Mountains of burnt bodies surround them as the gunslingers make their escape. No one says a word, not one of them, and why should they? What else is there to say? Especially when the flag of John Farson, flying above the remains of Gilead, says it all. The Battle of Jericho Hill, Issue Number 1, A New Road. It's been 7 years since Gilead fell, 9 since Farson took the barony seat of New Canaan, and Gilead, right now, looks like nothing short of hell. A huge fissure runs through the city because, more often than not, the world tends to take back what it feels rightly belongs to it. The crumbling ruins of Gilead are overgrown, the stench of moss and decay infests every nook and cranny, and the only noise in it, apart from birds and the skittering of vermin, is the low moaning and snarling of the slow mutants. These creatures now infest Gilead. They feast on the flesh of occasional vagabonds that try to comb the ruins for lost treasure and then wash down their flesh with the once good wine of Gilead, which has now become vinegar. We then get a glimpse of Gilead in its prime as a man plays music for the love of his life. A city where men learned to wield their weapons with unparalleled accuracy, mostly so that they would never have to use them. The hope was that their reputation would allow them to live in peace, and it worked, at least for a while, until John Farson's forces overwhelmed Gilead and brought death and destruction to the city. But when Gilead falls, so does one of the beams. Its reverb, which is called a beamquake, is felt throughout Midworld. This is something Martin had planned for all along. Perched on top of a tower, Martin screams, "Don't you know that this is not some random happenstance? That it's all part of the Crimson King's master plan? This is not the end of Gilead, it's the beginning of the end of all. All hail the Crimson King." What Martin doesn't know is that the fire raging beneath him has just reached Gilead's armory, and so, in an instant, a huge explosion destroys the tower beneath him and sends him falling to his death. Well, an ordinary man would have fallen to his death, but in Midworld, as with any place else, only the good die young. Monsters like Martin continue to live on to destroy more lives. And so, before he hits the ground, Martin turns into a raven and flies off. Several miles away, Roland, his quartet, and his followers feel the destruction of Gilead. It's the final dashing of any hope they might have ever had of going back. Roland curses Martin and Farson and vows to take revenge for all the people they've killed. And when the tremors reach them and the ground gives way, Roland defiantly jumps to safety, now hell-bent on exacting revenge. They don't notice Martin landing on a tree near them in his crow form, and though he knows that Roland is a meal for the Crimson King, he decides that he's going to serve them an appetizer of his own regardless. As Martin flies away, he shoots eldritch energy at Shimi, and the poor boy begins to spasm. This is when the ground beneath him opens up. However, Elaine manages to grab onto him before he falls to his death. The energy pouring out of Shimi pours through Elaine as well, though he screams for Roland and Bert to help Shimi because he's suffering from seizures. When all is said and done, and once Shimi has settled down, Roland asks what they're supposed to do next. where they're supposed to go, and he's genuinely asking Elaine and Cuthbert for advice. This is when Shimi speaks up and tells everyone he had a vision in which he was back at the tavern, mopping the floor while singing songs as he used to do. That's when 5 boys enter the tavern. The one in front was carrying a dead body, and he walked with a limp. Shimi was so scared of these boys that he continued mopping, and this is when the boy in front looked right at him and said, "They have killed our brother, who arose from the prim with us. He was strong once and beautiful, but now he's dead. He is dead, and we are weakening." The boy with the limp then placed the dead body on the ground at Shimi's feet, and that's when Shimi woke up. Elaine instantly knows what Shimi is talking about. The boys were the spirits of the beams, because this was no ordinary quake, this was a beam quake. One of the beams that holds up the Dark Tower had been broken. He then shows Roland the huge fissure in the earth and pours out some iron filings to see if the beam is truly broken or simply damaged. The filings form a straight line, which assures them that the remnants of the beam still exist. And this is when Roland realizes what they're going to do. They'll find the Dark Tower and climb to the top. Once there, they'll use its powers to set things right. This is when Randolph speaks up and says that the tower is just a legend, just like his grandmother who used to learn her future from her tea leaves. Roland chides him for mocking the dead and then orders him to tell them all he knows about the Dark Tower. Roland sighs and draws a clock face near him and explains to everyone that each X on the clock represents a number and 12 of them represent portals that lead in and out of Midworld. 12 portals connected by 6 magnetic beams, each of which maintains the proper alignment of time, space, size, and dimension. Since there are 6 beams but 12 portals, the beams unite opposite portals. Each portal is guarded by an animal totem, which is where the beams get their names. And each beam is supposed to be a living entity, as evidenced by Shimi's vision. The horizontal beam is the eagle-lion beam, which runs through Gilead, and they could simply follow it to reach the Dark Tower. But this is when Elaine steps in and asks an important question: which direction do they go? Do they go east or west? Roland sighs and tells them that they'll simply have to chance it, and this is when the others begin to doubt his plan, and Roland is forced to ground them again by reminding them of their heritage. He shows them his father's guns and shows them Arthur Eld's mark on them. These guns are the oldest symbol of Midworld's law that Farson spat upon. Arthur Eld fetched these guns from the Dark Tower and used them to forge a civilized world for all of them, which means Roland, his quartet, and his followers can and should do no less. He then calls out to everyone and declares if they don't wish to follow him, that's okay. It means that they part ways here, but those who do wish to come along should raise their hands. Every single one of them raises their hand, and Roland says, "All of you? I dared not hope, but expected no less. Very well then, to the Dark Tower, and let nothing stop us or slow our quest. We leave immediately. Can I pee first?" We leave right after Shimi pees. The Battle of Jericho Hill, Issue Number 2, The Unknown. 9 years. It's been 9 years since Roland took his followers to find the Dark Tower. 9 long, tiring years, and Roland remembers each day vividly. He remembers palavering with the ghosts of Stone Circle druids, hoping that the spirits would guide his way. He remembers every massacre Farson left in his wake, evidence of his growing power. Roland remembers the day he learned that the Crimson King was the reason the first beam broke. That day came near to breaking him. Every day did, to be honest, every day of those 9 long years. When people get lost, they tend to wander around in circles, which is what happened with Roland's quartet over the years. They now find themselves where they started, back in the ruins of Gilead. And here, Roland speaks to everyone while holding Gilead's flag. He tells them reality is coming undone, that under the careful guidance of the Crimson King, psychics from all over Midworld are gathered in prisons and forced to use their minds to erode the beams supporting the Dark Tower. Even clocks no longer tell the right time, because day comes seemingly whenever, and night goes on seemingly forever. Finding one's way is impossible, because the sun rises and sets where it will, and compass needles continue to spin without any sign of slowing down. Midworld is dying, and they're the only ones who can save it, because there's no one else trying, and the first step in preventing its destruction is taking the fight directly to Farson. He tells them about what Randolph found while scouting Farson's nearby camp, something we get to see firsthand. Farson's general, Grissom, is being informed that the lasers are now ready to be tested. Grissom warns the scientist, Wirtz, that he's killed every scientist that claimed the same falsely in the past, but Wirtz reassures him that the lasers are working. They then bring in a test subject, an unknown prisoner, and Grissom tells this man that it's an honor to be bestowed with this laser, and the man snarkily retorts that Grissom should bestow this honor upon himself if he likes it so much. Grissom powers up the laser, which disintegrates the man's body in seconds. Yet, even as he's dying, the man screams out into the world that the gunslingers will send Farson to his death, and all of Midworld will rejoice and celebrate. Elaine has been watching all of this through his spyglass, and he quickly returns to tell Roland and the others everything. Randolph was right. Farson has managed to revive yet another weapon of the old world. Randolph gloats that he's the best scout they have, that not even Farson's scouts can beat him, and nobody argues with him on that. Grissom tells Wirtz that he's proud of his work, and this is when Wirtz shows him another weapon that he managed to get working, a portable laser gun. But before he can demonstrate how it works, Wirtz is shot through the head by Roland's quartet using a sniper. General Grissom instantly fires the laser in the general direction of the shooter, only to destroy a significant number of his own soldiers. Aiming at a target 2 feet in front of you is easy. Firing a new weapon at a sniper far away, well, that's quite difficult. Bert then asks Roland why they're waiting around. Men from Farson's camp are fleeing, some of them are getting away. And this is when Roland reveals that they need some men to survive so that they can go on and tell the rest of Midworld about this massacre. To defeat enemy forces, you first need to defeat their minds, and this is what these escaping fugitives will help them do. Once enough of them have fled, they ignite the charges they strategically placed around the camp and blow it to smithereens. People from miles away hear the explosion. People from hundreds of miles away smell the stench of charred flesh being carried by the wind, and people from generations away still talk about the day Midworld exploded, or at least that's what it will seem like to them. However, the gunslingers flee the scene too soon. They fail to witness General Grissom arising from his supposed grave. Roland underestimated how sturdy the tank holding the laser was and how secure its insides were. When Grissom emerges, he angrily proclaims, "I'll cut those affiliation cretins to pieces by inches for this." That evening, Randolph is busy keeping a close eye on the perimeter of the camp when he's approached by his wife Chloe and their son Edmund. They want him to come berry picking with them, but unfortunately, Randolph can't leave his post, especially not if he wants his son to grow up in a world without Farson. He warns them to stay inside the camp's perimeter and sends them on their way. But here's the thing, places you know are safe are only safe while your eyes are on them. And so, while berry picking, Edmund notices an eye staring back at him from the bushes, and before he can warn his mother, a huge slow mutant leaps out of the bushes, grabs him by the foot, and whacks Chloe in the head with her own son. The Battle of Jericho Hill, issue number 3. Betrayed again. Roland and the other gunslingers are gathered in their council tent to talk to a man named Benedict. Benedict is an old man, and he's seething with rage, where he's lived long enough to see what Farson can do. Benedict has come from the south, where Farson is busy recruiting more and more masses to his army. The things Benedict has seen were so vile that he wants to gouge his own eyes out. He tells Roland bluntly that he needs more soldiers, many more soldiers. Roland agrees that recruitment should be their priority, but so is relocating the camp. This is when we learn that Chloe and Edmund were kidnapped by the slow mutant a fortnight ago. They have been going out on regular searches to look for them, but haven't found anything yet. He then apologizes to Randolph for failing to find his family, and Randolph simply says, "You're doing your best under the circumstances, Roland. One can ask no more of a man than that." A few minutes later, the meeting is over, and as they walk out, Roland comes across Eileen, who's training Jamie DeCurry in hand-to-hand combat. While Eileen is distracted by Roland, Jamie gains the upper hand and slams Eileen to the ground. He jokes that to win, he simply needs a small Roland in his hip pocket or his handy box. He then teases Eileen by asking where she would like to keep Roland, and she angrily tells him to shut up. As Roland walks with Elaine and Bert, we learn that Farson is trying to push them north so that he can trap them there in the winter, and this is when Roland decides that finding new recruits is their priority, which is why Randolph says that he'll stay behind because he's too depressed to be recruiting men for a war. The three of them promise to go looking for Randolph's family again as soon as they return. But once they're gone, Randolph starts speaking to himself and says, "They're talking about me, I know it, probably trying to make one final effort to find my family. I do not deserve friends such as these, and if they truly knew me, they would know that." And then Randolph runs away from camp. He runs so fast that one would assume John Farson himself was chasing them. Randolph stops when he reaches a cave, and inside is the monster that kidnapped his family. Edmund is in a cage beside the monstrous slow mutant, and the creature only allows Randolph to reunite with his son after he's ordered to do so by Martin Broadcloak. Randolph then realizes that Martin has killed his wife. His son cries his pardon for not saving her, and when Randolph angrily confronts Martin, the Dark Wizard chides him, tells him that he had to do so because Randolph was late, and if that he doesn't want a late son as well, he would do better to be on time in the future. We are then introduced to the cult of Amoko, led by a deranged priest who shouts out sermons beside a gas pump and makes his followers worship it. A group of non-believers is being held in a cage beside him, and when he sacrifices sheep to Amoko, one of them calls him a madman. The priest ignores the prisoners, pours sheep blood on the gas pump, and then gets ready for the sacrifice. Alongside the sheep's dead bodies, he also plans on burning the non-believers, and this is when his followers start beating drums. Drums that are heard by Roland's quartet and his 20 new recruits not far away. Roland sends Jamie to Curry to scout ahead, and upon seeing the cult, he races back and leads Roland and the rest of them there. They decide that intervening here would be the best choice. Destroying the gas pump will cripple Farson's force even more, especially after the destruction of Hamry. And so, just as the priest is about to burn the non-believers, Roland jumps in and shoots him in the head. The fire, however, has started. The dead priest still holds the gas pump, which continues to leak. Roland sprints instantly while ordering someone to shoot the rope holding the cage at his signal. He then leaps, grabs the cage, and while it swings away from the fire, Roland gives the signal. Making such a shot is tough for any gunslinger, which is why Roland should be grateful that one of his best takes the shot. While Bert and Elaine hesitate, Eileen doesn't, pulling out her weapon and taking the shot. The cage falls and breaks, the non-believers are freed, but when Roland gets on his feet, he's surrounded by angry cultists with rocks in their hands. They think they have him, but stones are no match for bullets. Within minutes, all of them have been killed. He then converses with the prisoners and learns that these men came from Kingstown with the intention of crippling Farson by destroying the gas pump. They brought explosives, and Roland decides that it's time they put them to good use. All this time, Eileen has been trying to tell Roland that she was the one who made the shot. Because Roland saw nothing, refuses to believe her. Meanwhile, back at the camp, Randolph and Shimi are out for one of their regular patrols, but Randolph deceives Shimi, leads him to the cave where his son is being kept. Upon seeing the young boy, Shimi rushes in to save him, only to be grabbed by Martin, chokes him, and then throws him to the ground. Randolph screams at the Dark Wizard because he had promised not to hurt the boy, and this is when Martin corrects Randolph and says that he had promised not to hurt the boy mortally because he's too precious. Little do they know that Shimi has landed near Marilyn's grapefruit, and he touches it and tries to contact Roland. He manages to do so, but unfortunately, Shimi's voice is too meek for Roland to make out what he's saying. He warns Roland that Randolph is a traitor, but Roland can't make out what he's saying, and before Shimi can try again, the young boy simply passes out. The Battle of Jericho Hill, issue number 4, Deception. It's summer now. Farson's plan of trapping the affiliation in the winter has failed, and Roland now has new recruits at his disposal, including a man named General DeMullet. We learn that Randolph lied to them and declared that Shimi was taken and killed by the slow mutants, and that he's still lying to the affiliation about his recon missions at Farson and Martin's behest. He has recently told them about Rimrocks, a place that's supposedly the ammo and tank stronghold of Farson. It's only 10 miles away, and General DeMullet wants to attack it with his forces to cripple Farson's army. Elaine offers to join him, and Roland agrees to send a few gunslingers they fully trust along with him. As the meeting wraps up, Elaine hints that he suspects that Randolph has betrayed them, and though Roland should believe him, Randolph's past heroics prevent him from doing so. We then switch to Farson's stronghold, where Randolph begs for his son's freedom so that they can live in peace somewhere far away. Martin, who always appears as Walter O'Dim when in Farson's company, knows that Randolph will betray them if they let him go, and this is when Farson offers Randolph the chance to join them. He's already betrayed the affiliation. He can simply join their cause and continue doing so. When it's clear that Randolph doesn't want to join them, Martin decides that Randolph's use to them is now over. He transforms himself into a monk, transforms a raven into Martin Broadcloak, and then gags and binds it. DeMullet, Elaine, and his army reach Rimrocks, only to find that the weapons stored there are rusted and that the place hasn't seen much use in years. Before DeMullet can warn the others that this is a trap, he's shot in the neck. Through the barrage of bullets that follows, Elaine somehow manages to stay alive, and then, with his dying breath, DeMullet screams, "Randolph must have betrayed us! It's Randolph!" And upon hearing this, Elaine knows that he needs to warn Roland as soon as possible. Elaine puts on a cloak and races away on his horse. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, at dawn, Roland and Cuthbert are scouting when they stumble upon one of Farson's camps barely a mile away from their own camp. The two of them quickly realize that Randolph has likely been lying to them, and an enraged Roland decides to take out his anger on this encampment. He kills the man guarding the perimeter with his knife and then shoots and kills every one of Farson's men. When he and Bert spot a cloaked rider racing towards them, they shoot him as well, thinking it's one of Farson's men. Alas, they have just shot and killed Elaine, one of their own quartet. As Elaine lies dying, he tells Roland about Randolph's betrayal and how they were ambushed in Rimrocks. Elaine then asks Roland to make sure he sends whoever killed him to hell because he wasn't able to see the killer due to the dark. Roland says, "That I can surely promise you, my dearest friend. By my own hand will your killer be damned for all eternity. Upon this truth I lay my soul." And then he and Bert carry Elaine's body back to camp. Roland hands the Horn of Eld to Bert so that he can blow it as soon as they're within earshot of their camp, but upon reaching it, they realize that everyone is already awake. Eileen is the one to greet them first, and she tells them that Randolph has returned. He was brought here by a monk, and he carries the body of his dead son. Farson's men used the boy for target practice. Roland hints to Eileen about Randolph's betrayal, and then orders Bert to take care of the man. Clearly thirsty for blood, Bert angrily confronts Randolph, and Eileen follows him, knowing that he will do something stupid. Randolph tries to explain things to Bert, but he gets kicked in the face instead. When Eileen tries to intervene, Bert tells her about his betrayal. This is when she asks if Randolph caused Elaine's death, and Bert is forced to reveal to her what actually happened. Randolph is indeed responsible for Elaine's death. The trigger was pulled by Roland and Bert. Randolph confesses to his crimes and then makes one last request. He places Edmund's body on top of Elaine's in the hopes that Elaine will be able to escort his young son to the clearing. Bert is about to kill Randolph for this, but Eileen stops him because Randolph's life is not his to take. Randolph agrees. He says, "Yes, my life is indeed not yours to take, it's mine." He then puts his gun under his chin and pulls the trigger. Roland, meanwhile, meets up with the monk in his tent. This time he sees clearly through Martin's schemes. The monk claims that he's from the Dark Tower, and he offers Martin's life to Roland as a token of generosity. Roland simply pulls the trigger and tries to kill Martin's form, which transforms back into a raven. Roland then kills the raven, and though the monk tries to manipulate him again, Roland sees through his lies. Roland points his gun at the monk. Before he can pull the trigger, Martin laughs and vanishes into thin air. Then he hears Bert blowing the Horn of Eld, and Bert screams, "The encampment here at Jericho Hill is under attack!" The Battle of Jericho Hill, issue number 5, and it doesn't end. The gunslingers rally up to battle, yet deep in their hearts, they know that this is not how it's supposed to end. They're good. Farson's bad. They're supposed to win this battle in the end. Yet here they stand on some big rocks people like to call Jericho Hill, clearly outnumbered and fated to their doom. In front of them is most of Farson's army, led by General Grissom, accompanied by his son, and Martin Broadcloak, or Walter O'Dim, or however he's known in his current form. Roland leads the charge and screams, "No quarter, and no mercy for them!" And this amuses Martin a bit, where even as death faces him, Roland hopes that he can win. The shooting starts, Farson's men begin to fall, but then death reaches out for the gunslingers, and the first to fall is Eileen Ritter. A spear stabs her straight through the heart, but her mind shows pity and prevents her from feeling the pain. In her final moments, Eileen simply worries if Roland is still angry with her. Then, Cuthbert is shot, once in the shoulder and once in the leg, and unlike Eileen's brain, his doesn't take pity on him and shut out the pain. Bert has to fight the pain to stay in the battle. Farson's flamethrower takes down Thomas and a few other gunslingers. While Roland is too stunned to defend himself, Jamie DeCurry leaps at him and saves his life. Roland curses at Jamie for distracting him, realizing too late that he's talking to a corpse. Jamie gave his life to save Roland's. It was Grissom's son who had Roland in his sights. The battle pauses for a moment, and Roland is about to offer the survivors the chance to leave when Bert tells him to shut up. He reminds Roland that they're in this together, and it's time they stopped retreating and stood their ground. Roland smiles and asks for the horn so he can blow it, but Bert smirks and says that he blows the horn better and Roland can have it once he dies. Bert and Roland are the only two gunslingers left, and they hug as Bert blows the horn. Roland screams simultaneously, "Heil! Forward! For the tower!" And so begins the final assault. Eventually, Martin decides to get some blood on his own hands and shoots Bert through the eye with his crossbow. This is the last straw for Roland. He goes berserk, firing blindly, and he keeps on firing until he falls. He doesn't even feel the bullets embedded in his body, and so when Grissom towers over him and says, "Surrender." Roland replies, "I refuse to accept your surrender." Grissom's laugh is followed by complete and utter darkness. Barson's soldiers then pile up the bodies, and as they leave, Martin spits on Roland's face and says, "I won. You will never reach the tower." Hours later, something begins to move in the pile of bodies. No living soul is there to witness, but Roland Deschain rises from his grave. Maybe his spirit is too stubborn to die. Maybe the gods reached down and touched him, or maybe he's possessed by some kind of demon. That would explain why Roland looks like an avenging spirit. As he says, "It's not supposed to end like this. I will not let it end. I will have revenge on the enemies of Gilead. I will find the Dark Tower. Find that great edifice in the Field of Roses, and when I find it, climb to the top. I will demand justice from whomever or whatever resides there, and he or she or it will give me that justice, and I will embrace my friends once more, and Gilead will live again." This defiant, avenging spirit stands there, half of his skin missing, but his heart whole, and it doesn't end.